Hello and welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where two fans and two non-fans talk about controversial or noteworthy comic books and comic book history. I'm Ryan.
I'm Sly.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Daryl.
And we're here again for part 3 of Flashuary, because I love the Flash so much and he runs so fast.
He does run pretty fast.
He does. He can run into my heart and then right out of it before I even notice.
Vibrates into your heart.
So we are skipping ahead. Last time we talked about one of the cornerstones of Mark Waid's run. Now we're going to skip ahead to the Geoff Johns run. So basically the only real things that happen is Wally and Linda get married, as I said last time. And then also Morrison comes in and does some weird stuff in his Justice League run where the Flash gets much more attuned to the Speed Force. So he can make his clothes out of it. And he could steal people's speed. That's like how Morrison kind of reshapes his powers.
I couldn't believe when he was doing that. I'm like, oh, he must mean he's kicking this thing down and is losing kinetic energy. I'm like, no, he's just draining it. I guess he could just drain
basically
speed.
So towards the end of Mark Waid's run, what happens is Wally actually goes into the Speed Force, and he's the only person that's able to come back out. And he uses the phrasing that always gets used is that Linda is like his lightning rod, and his love for her, and like she grounds him in a way, like I think it's a pun, but she like, and that allows him to return from the Speed Force, where every other speedster like Barry Allen who ran into the Speed Force is unable to return on their own. So it's like one of the things that like bumps up Wally's power level. And then Morrison around the same time was telling some stories where Wally had like a direct connection because of that to the kinetic energy of the Speed Force. And from a quantum physics level, like when you look at relativity, it's like E equals MC squared, like energy and matter are the same thing but in different forms, and that's a real life thing. That's not a comic book thing. So Morrison kind of took that idea and made it, well, if Wally has enough energy to be able to run this fast all the time, if he gets enough control, he should also have control over how that energy manifests in like the material plane. So that's why he can make his clothes out of it.
Okay.
I think it's still less goofy than having a ring that pops out a giant suit.
It's one of those things that like it's really funny when people says it's to me, like as a physics major, it's really funny to me that like I always say like he runs so fast he makes his pants out of it, but that actually has more grounding in science than most other comic book things, as stupid as that sounds. But like basically at this point in Wally's career, he's been powered up a lot, but less like, oh, he can run 10 times the speed of light, and more that he has like this ultimate control.
He can also run to that speed of light.
Well, he can also do that, but like it's not usually written that way. It's usually more written as like he's controlling this extra dimensional field of energy that like the book, what was interesting is around this time the book was getting more and more sci-fi, but then Geoff Johns takes over, I think around like issue like 162, 164, somewhere around there, and he actually puts Wally, he starts to flesh out Keystone City a lot more, so we're kind of skipping around his run a little bit, but one of the things that he does is he establishes Keystone City as this like, this was in 2001, 2002, so it's before the economic crash, but he establishes it as this like blue-collar, like Detroit analog where like
they talk about cars a lot here.
I was thinking the same thing,
so they talk about how like they build cars, and one of the things that one of the issues that I included in here, not only as a prologue but also just because I think it does give a little insight into what Johns was doing for the world of the Flash at this point, is he also starts to put a big focus on unions and their role in the city. And I think that's like, I've never seen that in a superhero comic before, so I find that to be really, really fascinating. And during this time, which we'll get into next week, but he's also establishing the rogues and a lot of the villains as these very blue-collar, like, working-class guys. Like, very much, like, I find that the Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming feels like the way Geoff Johns writes the rogues. Of, like, they still have the sci-fi stuff, they still do these, like, kind of goofy things, like flying around and have these big, like, laser cannons and stuff, but they're very much grounded from a place of, like, we are part of
this
city.
as like a profession.
Yeah, the rogues are like a gang that do it as a job, and they treat themselves like this is our job. We're just working stiffs, and like there's later arcs that we're not going to be able to cover on the show just because they don't really fit into the format. But like Wally around this time he becomes like a mechanic for the police department, and he ends up having this relationship with Captain Cold where they go to the same bar diner after work, and they don't know who each other are. And it's just like, but it's just this like work sucks kind of thing, and there's like this tension between them that I find really, really interesting, but it just like doesn't work with the way we're doing this saga. So it's something that we're not going to talk about, but it's interesting to me that around this era, and we'll start to see a little bit of this, but more so next week, that Johns is focusing more on the like working class aspect of superheroes, which is interesting because we always talk about, especially in Marvel too, that it's like New York is where all the superheroes from, and Gotham and Metropolis are clearly like New York, New Jersey kind of cities, and the Flash is one of the only like Midwest heroes. And I think that it's cool to lean into that and embrace that in a way that I think like makes him stand out more so than just like any other superheroes on the Justice League at the time that are like either from California or from New York, and that's it, you know?
Yeah, it reminds me of how many like people are stationed in New York City in Marvel.
Yeah,
where it's like you guys.
Everyone.
It's because all the writers were in
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's why.
But I always like when they kind of diversify the world a little bit, and I think Johns does a pretty good job at that. But those are the kind of things that like we're not so much going to talk about. So I just wanted to like catch up. This is the world that we're now jumping into with in the middle of Johns' run. So what we're going to do is this week we're going to cover the Hunter Zolomon first story from Secret Files and Origins 3, the Grodd issue of 178, I think. I have the trades which don't have them labeled.
178.
Yeah, and then Blitz, which is 192 to 200. So let's jump into it, because that is a bunch of stuff, but I think it'll go pretty quick. So, okay, so Secret Files and Origins 3 was just this like one-off that... Secret Files and Origins was a series that DC would do every once in a while in the 90s that's just like, hey, here's, if you are interested in this franchise, this is a way to like catch you up and see a peek at what's coming, but it would have like character bios and everything. So it's like a big recap issue. So, but this one starts with, and it's also, most of the art we're talking about is going to be drawn by Scott Collins. And it starts with a guy with a cane who's sitting on a train coming into Keystone City, and we see
Guy on a cane on a train.
Yes, a guy with a cane on a train. And this is where we get a lot of that kind of exposition that's like, you know, we come into, he's a FBI investigative support unit graduate that he's coming in as a profiler.
He's like the guy in Criminal Minds, but for rogues.
Yeah, pretty much.
So this is the question I always like wonder whenever I start these things. Is Hunter Zolomon, this guy's name, is he an already established character when he's
this is his first appearance.
Character.
Okay. Because they give him a lot more like backstory of like, I was part of this unit, then I was part of this unit. I'm like, I feel like they only use, or at least I only assume they do that when they're like, they have that much of a backstory.
Yeah,
like
no,
he's
that's
pulling from
all.
older
This
issues.
is his first appearance.
Okay.
What do you guys feel about Scott Collins' art, by the way?
I hate the art.
Really?
He's my favorite Flash artist.
I like the art.
I don't know why I did not like any of the art in this whole
That's
series.
so interesting. He's the only artist I've ever bought original pencils from.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's very. I find it very unique. It has like no shadows whatsoever. It's all like lines.
That's true.
It's a very. It works well with the colors, which are like it's a very comic booky art style, like a modern version of like I'm not sure describing it. It's very unique. I always
You like it, Slay?
I really like it.
What about you, Daryl?
So there's a couple there's a lot of splash panels in this of like destruction. It's spoilers. It's when Grodd is introduced. He's gonna be like wrecking the town and wrecking buildings and stuff. And there's it's very detailed. And this guy like knows his architecture really well. And I like his characters too. My problem, and again, this could be like a thing where the colorist tone is very it's very upbeat, positive, almost like cartoony. The colors being used here. It also works with this art where it's like the Flash looks cartoony too, rather than like the realism that we've seen from the older issues we've been reading.
I think that's what turned me off to it, was how cartoony it was. It's like it's so cartoony. I'm like, this could be a Saturday morning cartoon, but it's like a kind of dark story.
That's a very valid point, because this story is not like the Mark Waid stuff. It is very much like Hunter Zolomon signifies what this plot's about. It's about criminal masterminds and murder and stuff like that.
I think that's part of my problem when I was reading it, is that there was like this dark edginess to a lot of it. Like the first time you see Grodd, he has blood all over his mouth, and then he just starts like killing people. Like it's like, oh my god, he's ripping this guy apart, and it's like the way they portray it is like it's too light for how like dark it is, like being consumed by this giant ape man.
My dad's dying of cancer, and she just looks like this like like Static Shock like or something like.
She does look like a Static Shock character. I want to say this is why I do love the art. I would like this. I would like the story a lot less if it wasn't for the start. Like if this looked like a Mark Millar book, that'd be too gritty for me. I don't like the Flash being that gritty.
I will mention, like even though I don't know how fitting it is, I think this guy's a good artist. Like I look at this art and I enjoy reading it. It doesn't distract me, other than like against the material. But I'm like, this guy's like, when I think of like the Flash and camp, it's like this guy's a really good fit. And again, like all of his architectural details, like how much detail he puts into every page is pretty astounding.
So I'm really glad that you guys bring this up, because this is actually, funny enough, a problem that a lot of people have with both the Flash and also with Geoff Johns in general. That like, and I really like the balance between camp and seriousness, because I like, it's the same kind of thing like with a lot of like kid shows like Adventure Time or Steven Universe, where they seem very fun, but then there's this much darker undertone like under it, where like I like that kind of cartoony but like still kind of serious thing, but I understand why some people don't like it. And I think Collins does this perfect balance where it's still light and fun, but the emotions in all his faces still feel very real to me, and I think he conveys what the characters are feeling when they are like in the darker places. But I understand why people don't like that. Like it's not one of those things that I'm like, how could you not like this? I love it.
Yeah, I'd say like he's very good at like his expressions on all the characters' faces. It's one of those things where I feel like reading it that he makes the serious stuff lighter, which is I think what you might like about it, because you don't get to a point where you're like, wow, this is a really like painful panel or page of like this person suffering. It's just like, oh, this person's sad, I can see this, but it's not like agonized.
It's interesting because you guys, I'm assuming Phil, you're seeing the dark stuff and you're like, I wish the art matched this. I'm seeing the bright colors and the line work, and I'm like, I wish the story matched this more. I don't like how dark the story gets.
I'm not. I don't disagree with that. I hated all of this a lot. Okay. I don't know why.
I'm gonna say I think it's significantly worse. I've read this in the past, and I think it's significantly worse than Mark Waid's stuff. So I always felt bad shitting on Geoff Johns because he's a great writer. But there's parts of this I just don't like. He never struck the tone for Flash that Mark Waid did, and I don't like it. But go ahead, Phil. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's what I was gonna say. I would actually be okay probably with the art more if the story was just lighter in general. Like I just did not like any of this, and I was trying to figure out why, because I didn't want to come here and just be like, it sucks because I said so. I'm like, I must be disliking this for some reason, and I was like, maybe I was just in a bad mood when I read it, but I wasn't. I was actually really cheerful when I was reading this stuff, and I was just like, I hate this.
That was kind of not. I didn't hate last week's reading, but that was after I had finished it. I'm like, why don't I like that as much as I think I should, or as much as you guys probably will?
There's a scene in this first issue where this radio station guy is like has a guy with a
oh
bloody
my god,
knife.
Okay, so this guy's name. Okay, I'll just get the story a little bit. So a guy named Murmur has broken out of prison or whatever, and he's fucking onomatopoeia. And
yeah.
I was wondering if I remember this comic being worse than it was, because I was picturing this comic in my mind, and I was picturing onomatopoeia was in the story.
He's not onomatopoeia at all.
He's basically onomatopoeia. It's the same thing. He's quiet and he's a mass murderer.
Okay, but like, I mean, it's more so he was established in a previous issue that is right before this in the trade, and like he's definitely a different character. Onomatopoeia is like he makes all these goofy sound effects. This guy sewed his own mouth shut. Like
I know, but it's the same idea that he's a silent mass murderer
like a mass murderer in which like the word bubbles don't matter as much. It's kind of just stuff to terrify you. But onomatopoeia is a little bit funnier because he's saying the sound.
They're both trying to. They're both like edgy murderer characters. They both really. It feels like the same ballpark for me. Like I feel. I literally imagine this character being onomatopoeia in my mind when I was remembering this comic.
For me, like onomatopoeia came after this, right?
Yes.
For me, I was just like, Kevin Smith's just less creative than I thought looking at Murmur.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. If anything, that's a critique on onomatopoeia than murmur.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but it's a kind of critique on these type of characters that like it's a Flash is colorful R, colorful this, and you have this mass murderer who's like who has
sewn his mouth shut.
Yeah, sewn his mouth
and
shut.
murders
Like,
people.
And as he's grabbing the radio station guy, and there's a bloody knife, he's about to stab him in the neck. The art in it, for some reason, it just looks like it's like this. He's like has a shocked face as the Flash jumps in. His blood is spraying all over the panel, and I'm like, it just doesn't look right. It looks like he's in like a webcomic or something. I can't place why.
A webcomic is a good comparison because like it just doesn't capture the horror of the scenario. That's the
Yeah, you look again like at the blood, and there's like a lot of light tones in it, and it looks like if it was dipped in like red, like jelly or juice.
And the rest of the rogues show up right after this, and he's like, he catches Anthrax that's about to kill Keystone City. Like, again, this is a pretty dark thing. The rest of the rogues show up, and it just seems to me, again, like, it's like a cartoon. They're like, oh, it's magenta, and he's like, and girder. And for some reason, it's just it looks like a cartoon so much.
The more we talk about this, the more I realize this reminds me of Kaiju Max in a sense, where the art was so colorful, and like it feels less like look at this horrible stuff. It looks more like you're playing a video game that has like an edgy vibe to it, like you're playing like Mortal Kombat.
I've never felt that way because I feel like the main crux is, I guess, because like probably because I'm never distracted by colorful costumes and things like that. Like that's just something that like I don't really care about. It's more that like I feel like maybe not in this story, but throughout the run, I feel like even when the costumes are goofy or like whatever, I feel like I am empathizing with the characters a lot more than usual because of the detail that Scott Collins puts into people's faces and emotions. They feel every single character in these books, even ones in the background, to me don't feel like that kind of faceless, edgy, like whatever. They all feel like real people to me. Even though it's cartoony, I feel like I'm getting some sort of emotional connection out of like a pretty large cast personally.
I can see that.
I also think like the Kaiju Max comparison's a little bit different because the Kaiju Max had like really serious material, whereas here it's like onomatopoeia just kind of feels out of place. It's like if you remove the serial killer that has sewn his mouth shut, it's like everyone else like Magenta and Girder are both silly, but they both
I mean
like
more
fit
when
within the story.
when the blood appears on page, it feels like that.
Yeah,
like when Mark Waid had blood in his story, it felt more like this. The art was treating it like it deserved. Like it was like black and kind of off-putting when it showed up. But here it just seems like it's just over too much blood. It's like cartoony levels of blood.
Again, it's like juice. And it's overdone.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to just get into the story.
Yes.
So Zolomon comes and he has been hired to be the profiler, like we said, and when he gets there, he does some exposition. Like he talks about how this old Flash villain from the 80s is like the union boss, and we don't really see him throughout the whole run really any like supervillain stuff. He's basically just a union boss.
But he seems like he's scheming behind the scenes. He's like, we'll get them all.
Yeah, but he's not. Spoilers.
Oh, okay.
But and then we meet some of the other cops that we have, which like we have Officer Chire, who's like this gruff guy who like is softened throughout the run. We have Detective Murillo, who's this guy who just like talks about his wife all the time. And they're the main cops that Flash usually works with. And Hunter comes in and rounds out their like cop team as like they're the metahuman squad. They're the ones that are supposed to catch all the rogues. And
did you mention that Hunter Zolomon has a bum leg? Or
he has a cane, so there's something wrong with his leg, and that's really
is that offensive saying bum leg or bad leg?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. but yeah. So that's he's Hunter talks about how like he's a big fan of the Flash and like he respects how he like was started as a teenager and he just wants to do good and like that he's just like this good-natured guy, and he starts poring over the pile of this like serial killer case that we were talking about with Murmur, and he deduces who it was. He says that he's gonna head to this radio station because that's where this guy was first humiliated, and we don't have to get into Murmur's whole origin. It was in a different issue, but like the main thing is he does that like Criminal Minds thing where he's like, well, because this radio guy made fun of him, this is where he's gonna strike next. Like we've seen that in a lot of different things.
I want to say that's off-putting because when I think Flash, I never thought criminal minds, like Batman. This will make perfect sense for Batman. Like,
well, but the thing is, it's not the Flash doing it. He has to hire somebody to help him catch these people.
I know, but
I think that works.
I know, but then that kind of talk, like you have to get to Murmur's head and realize he's trying to kill this way. Like that feels like I'm watching Hannibal all of a sudden, like out of nowhere.
But I think that's the point. Like, because Wally doesn't have the skill set. So since the Rogues have come back, because the Rogues were not really a big part of Wade's run at all. This is like the first time they've really been heavily featured in like decades. Like they've been around, but they weren't like main features of the book. So like Wally being like, I can't figure this out. Like, I'm not smart. He works with the police more, and he has to get a profiler. I find that to be pretty interesting.
I guess it's different between like trying to figure out Captain Cold, a guy who has an ice gun, and versus figuring out Murmur, who stabs people. For me,
I don't know. They're all criminals. Like every supervillain, I think, has a psychosis on why they do what they do.
Yeah, I just feel like Murmur's just like a bit more unhinged. Because Captain Cold's a guy with a nice gun. Murmur sewed his mouth shut.
Yeah. So then we get like the setup of what Sly was talking about with Hunter's disability is Flash is like, come on, I can carry us all to here. You're coming, right? And Hunter thinks, yes, I am. I cracked this thing. But then he looks at his leg and he's like, no, I get in the way. The cane makes me slow. And he like clenches around. And he's like, damn this thing. And then we get all the Murmur stuff that we were talking about where he's, trying to use anthrax and kill everybody. And then this group...
Murmur has no powers, does he?
No, he's just a serial killer.
How the fuck does Flash not stop him in like 5 seconds?
So, what happens is he focuses on the anthrax, and then a bunch of supervillains with powers show up.
He can move the speed of light. Like,
I mean, this is always the problem with the Flash. It's like, how come he reacted so slow to this when he can like think at the speed of light?
Yeah,
it's just like it is. Flash is always like both power convenience and like reaction convenience.
But that's one of the things. Like for me, as the character, you like just have to accept that.
You've never been like super big on it seems like you really enjoy the Flash's powers, but you're not this like breaks my believability in this.
I think it's just impossible to like have a speedster character that has that kind of powers without like you have to ignore it. You just have
I think sometimes it does work more than other times. Like when he's fighting other speedsters, you can always kind of buy it. When he's fighting someone like Grodd, you're like it's not like speed and strength are unrelated like they are in video games. Like someone who's super strong will swing their fists like super fast too because they're strong. Mm-hmm. So it's like I can get why Grodd could land a hit on him. But when it's a guy with a knife and you can run around the globe 12 times before Superman can blink, I'm like, you should be able to just punch this guy in the face.
For me, as a Superman fan, Superman should beat a lot of his villains very easily. But but for me, I'm accepting of it as long as the villain is greater than life. Like if it's like a guy with a big machine threatening the city, like that's why I like Intergang. I like a bunch of guys with mech suits and stuff. Like I like to imagine what could be a threat to somebody like Superman. Murmur is not a threat in any way whatsoever to Flash.
So I mean, that's kind of the whole point. Is he stops his plan almost immediately, and then these other villains.
I know, but he should be like. And Murmur's out, and now these other guys fight. Like Murmur it's not even like a contest. Like he shouldn't even like be a factor. Really.
You want him to be like dead immediately.
He's just the catalyst of this whole thing. And
I know, but he stays for the rest of the story. He's here for us to fight too. So.
Yeah, so what happens then is Girder and Magenta, who at this time in the book, Johns was starting to build up where there was the main rogues that were the Silver Age villains and this new gang that was like a bunch of crazy, much more edgier characters. And pretty much what Johns is building up throughout this whole run is that there's all the new characters that are like Girder and Murmur and all these edgier new characters are trying to be the top gang in the city. And the other ones are like, this isn't how we work. Like, we shouldn't be serial killers and a bunch of murderers. That's not what we do. And
the old age crime versus new age crime.
Yeah, and the climax of the story of his whole run that, again, we're not going to talk about, but if I wasn't going to bring it up at all, but if we're going to spend 20 minutes talking about these characters, I guess it's important.
We should mention Girder is like a metal dude and Magenta is like a telepath.
Yeah. And the premise basically here is that these edgy characters can only go so far, and that like a city cannot function with these characters running around. So that's like the real crux of the story of his whole run is old school rogues versus new school rogues, and what actually, it's kind of like a meta thing of like in comics, what is the better story to tell. And John's, spoilers for the end of his run, he falls on the side of like the classic, more like relatable, down to earth villains are better storytelling tropes.
That Captain Cold's better to have in a story than Murmur.
Yes. basically it just ends, and it ends with Hunter being like, oh wow, like we saved lives, even though I couldn't be there, I still love to walk around the city. It doesn't seem so harsh at night, so like dirty. I think this will work. It'll help me forget the accident, forget about her. Yeah. And it's Hunter like looking wistfully into the moon, and he's like, I look forward to this. And that's like just our introduction to like the whole point of this issue was just to like give you a preview of what was to come. It wasn't supposed to tell like a deep murmur story. It's just supposed to be like, this is the gang of rogues. These are the kind of people that they're collecting for like the new rogues. And here's Hunter, and here's the cops, and here's their relationship with Wally.
Yeah, and it even ends on like the stinger of like, oh, I'm the thinker, and you're like, oh, who's this guy? But that guy's not in this story at all.
Yeah. Like, and again, it wasn't Flash issue 180. It's the whole point is it's supposed to be that catch-up special that you buy if you're looking to jump in. Right?
And let's talk about like the quality of the story. Hunter Solomon is one of the reasons why I did like the story until a certain point, because he's a very relatable character, especially compared to Flash, who's obviously a much larger than life character.
Yeah, and Hunter is a major character for a lot of his run, in that like we're gonna be skipping ahead a lot. So like this takes place around issue 170. And we're skipping now to 178 for just this one-off that Hunter's not even in. And then we're skipping to 192. So Hunter had been in the book as Wally's friend and confidant and, like, coworker, helping him with these things for, like, a year or two at that point in the book. So, like, even though we're going to jump ahead, he's still, like, he is a major force in Johns' run here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think real quick, I just want to really quick go through the Grodd issue, because I think it would be easier. The main crux of it is it's the same kind of thing where we have that new rogues.
So it has the Union stuff where the Cage Factory is caging Gorilla Grodd, and Union's like, you gotta be part of the Flash City Union. I forget the.
So basically, a privatized privatized military force is like, we can take over all of the like security needs that you need, and this is like, this is pre-Iraq war, so like Blackwater wasn't a thing that people talked about all the time, but I find that to be a really interesting idea, especially this early in comics, of this like private militarized force are like, we are transferring this gorilla who's a bloodthirsty animal with psychic powers. I know
this psychic gorilla from his own gorilla city.
But that's just you got to deal with it. Sorry,
I can't deal with it.
It's one thing if he feels like a goofy gorilla, but this story, his blood's gushing from his mouth. Like he's trying to be a dark, edgy villain here.
And like I think it works. I don't care. So the main thing is they're coming through, and the rest of the city, like all the workers in the city, are like, this is a union town. You have to be part of our prison union system to be transferring prisoners. And the union boss, Keith, is like, you got like, this isn't going to work. Like, and they talk about how a couple of the guys there were blacklisted for basically being scabs for previous companies that went under. And like, Keystone is a union town. If you're not part of the union, you're kind of setting yourself up to be unemployed in the future. And those new rogues like sneak in and basically just fuck with the tank so that Grodd escapes. And we just have a big fight where Grodd is, like I said, he's got this telepathy that's showing Wally like his deepest fears. He's murdering people and he's smashing through buildings. And the main thing is like, it's just a lot of it is Wally just trying to save everybody and cope with like the horrible images that Grodd's showing him as he basically destroys a city block. And
there's a it's obnoxious because Wally never gives a good solution to Grodd. He keeps yelling at the security people, saying, "How dare you try to cage Grodd? He's above you," or whatever.
That's not what he's saying. He's saying he will break out. You have to bring him back to like where he came from.
I know, but they say like Gorilla City doesn't exist anymore. I think. Like,
they say Gorilla City's in like anarchy.
Yeah, so he's like, I have no good solution, but I'm just gonna criticize you for obviously trying to keep this wild monster in check.
Yeah, it's like when Sly talks to me about politics.
I think, I mean, I've said it before. It's just like the whole argument of like, well, we have to imprison them because that's the just thing to do. I'm like, it's King Kong. It's not.
Yeah, it's King Kong. Like, they shot King Kong. They can shoot King Kong. They can shoot Gorilla Grodd.
He's sentient. Just because he's an ape doesn't mean he can just like, well, you don't need to read him his rights.
So at the final panel after Grodd is massacred, it's the city's a whole block of the city's in ruins. Like, people died during this fucking rampage. This is one rampage from Grodd. He is a danger to everyone around him.
So part of, and we talk about this, it'll come up in the next story too, but part of what Johns is building around here is there's this warden figure that we meet, Warden Wolf, who believes in very harsh punishment and very harsh justice. And in Iron Heights, which is the Flash's prison, it's like he keeps them in costume because not with their gear and everything, but his whole thing is like the second they become supervillains, they cease to be human beings, they cease to be citizens, and we're going to treat them the way they have set up to deserve. So like he has one guy that's like this radioactive villain that like when he walks around he gives people cancer. He uses him to power the prison. He like basically tortures people and is like really, really harsh punishment. And part of the debate that we see throughout Johns' run is where does Wally fall on that? Because Wally, as we've established previously, has been a more conservative character, but he's coping with how he feels about certain things. Like we mentioned last time during the 2 episodes ago during the trial of the Flash that Wally testifies that Barry shouldn't have used criminal punishment and he shouldn't have executed Reverse Flash, but since then he has started to think about it more and he's reversed that position and he's still trying to find his way of, am I that all life is valid superhero like Superman or Batman, or am I this more like middle America heartland, and I'm using air quotes here, like, this is what they deserve type of more conservative figure. And having a really harsh prison, that the argument here that they keep making is you can't keep him here. Mm-hmm. And the warden's like, yes, we can. We have the power for it. And he's like, no, he needs to be put away. And later on, he will be called for him to be put down, which is like, to me, that I know you guys are like, I know Phil, you keep arguing like how you feel about this, but these arguments are also made between characters. And I think that's interesting.
I like that they brought it up with the Wolf stuff later on, where they're like, he doesn't believe in rehabilitation, he believes in punishment.
Yeah.
I'm like, this would happen in the city with all these like rogues. You would probably have a very hardline like police officer.
I appreciate the corporal punishment arguments, like, or capital punishment arguments in general, but it's like, I feel like it's a hard analogy to make always. Like the same way in Kaiju Max, I'm like, but they're like it's different when they're monsters. Like it's different when it's King Kong or a lava monster. Like,
but the thing is, to me, that's such a slippery slope argument because like when you look at how a lot of people treat criminals, like they talk about them as if they're also monsters. Like, but a serial killer dehumanizing these people is what we do already as a society.
But a serial killer can't explode. Like, he can't explode the prison he's in and kill everyone in New York. Like,
but the thing is,
it's like if a serial killer had a gun permanently attached to his body and with infinite ammo. Like, it's like at that point, then it becomes a different question of whether or not it's not a matter of humanity. It's a matter of danger to society.
I don't know. I would like to think that even if like violence kept getting expedited, we would be allowed to have a conversation about where the line should be drawn for capital punishment.
But they had the conversation. They keep bringing Gorilla Grodd in, it seems like, and he's still King Kong every time and kills the city. Like
it's because like previously he was that's why the transition from Goofy to serious is always weird, because he existed for so long. He's a goofy like reoccurring villain. If he's killing people, like this conversation would have been brought up way earlier. Like because I don't know when he became dark and edgy.
Right here.
So but like Flash acts like.
Yeah, but that's how comics have always worked. Like when you update a premise, like they kind of fold it in like this is the character.
I know, but that makes a plot hole, because Flash would not be like, he would not be so aware of Grodd and still be so oblivious to what Grodd is capable of.
I mean, it's the thing is like throughout the 90s, it was like a slow ramp up. Like it's not that he was always super campy and then all of a sudden it was this, but it wasn't like this is an escalation of it. This is a reimagining of the character. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't know. I find the whole, like, I'm uncomfortable with the argument of we as just citizens can make the decision when someone is a monster that deserves to be murdered. I'm uncomfortable with that. And if this is a state, they don't talk about this, but if this is a state where the death penalty is outlawed, which is a thing in many states, all of a sudden, like, should we be like, oh, for this case, we should start killing people again? I find that to be a troubling argument.
I think it stretches the believability that they wouldn't reinstall death penalty and enact it on these people.
I don't know. I'm against the death penalty 100% in all cases.
But You're not living in a city where your city block was destroyed by Grodd, and like this happened in like 1 week. Next week, murdered a bunch of people.
Okay,
like,
but I really am uncomfortable with the argument that, well, if your circumstances were different, then you would feel differently, and your morals and your political beliefs would be different. And I find that to be kind of like off-putting and reminiscent of like all the times that people were like, oh, well, when you have a real job, you'll be a conservative, or all these kind of things. And I know that it's different because it's hyperbolized for a comic book story, but I find that to be a really non-compelling argument that we don't live in this world either. I would like to think that because I think that the death penalty is morally wrong, that even if someone was terrible and really terrible, I am not going to just agree that, yes, I would definitely change my entire belief on the sanctity of life and the role that the government plays in that.
I'm not saying that as... I'm saying that as how human beings will react in this city. You cannot have the optimistic view on justice that these people have and have mass murders in the town.
You guys are looking at this from like two different perspectives. Of Ryan looking at it from like an individualistic perspective and being like, I'd be uncomfortable with them having this in here. And Sly's looking at it from like a sociological perspective where it's like, why wouldn't they have the death penalty even if it's wrong?
Not to mention, for a lot of people, like I'm also against the death penalty.
I am too. I am against the death penalty as well. It's like
I'm like, a lot of the things I think about are like, well, the government, you can't know for 100% that anyone is guilty. A lot of times, people don't, like, the story is mishandled. The case is mishandled. I don't want to ever assume that there's a chance.
But that's
that
not why I'm
someone.
against the death penalty. I'm against death penalty because I think it's wrong. Even if they're guilty, I think it's wrong.
I don't think we should spend this whole episode talking about this. About would you approve of the death penalty for comic book villains?
So we're skipping ahead now to 192 to 200, which they have a couple different like 3-issue arc titles, but this is fall under the banner of Blitz, which
also all the rogues are free now. We didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Grodd.
Well, no,
they're in
about
prison.
to.
They're about to become free now because Grodd sends a bunch of monkeys with his telepathy to attack.
Oh, Grodd.
To attack the fucking prison. So, after that conversation about death penalty,
we're laughing because in the comic it shows like the monkeys parachuting down from a plane. With, like,
good.
With
this is objectively good. Fuck you guys.
I can't. I can't.
This would be great. Okay, not getting into Silver Age versus Modern Age anymore. Fuck it.
Yeah, please don't.
Okay, so while we get to introduce the Static Shock looking girl. I forget. What's her name?
So her name is Peekaboo. Her
Peekaboo.
whole premise is she can teleport, but every time she teleports, she leaves an explosion behind her. And in a previous issue, she was locked up because she was trying. Her father was dying, and she was trying to go to med school to be the doctor to save him, but she couldn't finish it fast enough. So she basically had to use her powers to try to force the hospital to take care of him. And she just has like a domino mask and a t-shirt, and she's now in prison, and Hunter Zolomon is here as like her caseworker, basically trying to make the case that it's a more complicated case than just black and white. It's that, she's trying to do the right thing. She's in distress, and the warden is like, no, she's a rogue. She put 4 men in the hospital. She's a bad person. And while he's been waiting for hours to talk to her, and like, as like the role of like a social worker type, and they have these guards in full riot gear beating her and basically trying to like put her under enough sedation and medication so that she can't convince the cops that she's a victim.
So immediately after we see the parachuting gorillas, we get introduced to a guy who rips off his skin and throws them like playing cards.
Sly acts like these are major characters. What happens is
but like this, I'm talking about. I want to set the tone for like the tone disparities, because that's my problem with Flash. Okay, so guy rips off his skin and throws them like Gambit. He's edgy Gambit, and then so Grodd.
It's called Double Down, right?
Double Down, yeah. And but like Ryan hinted at, none of these characters are relevant. It's just to show all the Flash rogues breaking out, but then Grodd shows up and he's like, "Get the fuck out of here, rogues! I'm here to fight the Flash." Basically,
I like seeing all of the rogues come out. Just seeing like, because again, I didn't know who was like old age, who was like new, and
so
just
these
seeing
are almost all new except for the top. They're all new characters.
Okay,
except for the top and Abracadabra.
I feel like the top, yeah, because Abracadabra is just like a magician guy that teleports in and out, and the top we'll see a bit more of him later. He's this guy that pretty much like skews with your like internal balance in your head. And
I think it's a really cool power.
It's basically Count Vertigo.
I think it's great, especially against someone who's like, I'm really fast. It's like, well,
I want to appreciate that when there's this one villain. This is such a minor thing, but I was like, I like this. When Blacksmith shows up, I think she was like the previous like leader of all the rogues, right?
Yeah.
Her suit. Usually, almost all female comic book villains have like lipstick. And I just like that she doesn't. She just has like these white lines going from like her lips over like it doesn't show like her nose. She looks unconventionally like she's unattractive kind of when you look at her. Like you can tell she's a woman because she's got.
She looks like a female Apocalypse from X-Men.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
And I after just seeing so many like women villains just be like, "Hello, boys." It's just nice seeing someone that look neat.
So, I mean, also one other thing that I just want to mention. So is that we also, before Wally goes there, we get him and Linda together and they're talking about how this was revealed in a previous story is probably pretty clear, but they're expecting a child.
Yep. So the next issue has one of the fights between Flash and Grodd.
Grodd pretty much
like
he
said,
starts like
he doesn't
fighting
care.
against the Flash, and this is when he's just telling the rogues, just like get off here, and they're like, "You got it, like I'm out of here. See you later."
Yeah, like he beats them up if they don't leave.
And Hunter's in like the hospital bed because he got like tossed around a little bit
by Grodd.
Yeah,
and he keeps
or by one of
Grodd
the monkeys. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because some of the monkeys get beaten up by the other rogues too. Like one of the guys was like, "Speak no evil, monkey," and turns him into a fucking ice.
Also,
whatever.
One of the things like I had wished they'd done with Grodd is that they did put like some like gray highlights in his hair or something. They made him a little bit more distinctive than the other monkeys because I couldn't tell. Because when the monkeys come down, they all have pink eyes, which Grodd has since he's a psychic gorilla. And I just couldn't tell which of them were like the Grodd versus Grodd controlled.
That's fair.
And for clarification, I do believe they're normal gorillas. Grodd just mind controlled them.
Yeah, he is.
Yes,
he is.
yes.
Yep.
But it does give them the same look as him. And he keeps showing, since he's psychic, he keeps showing the Flash like images of Linda being tortured and killed, and himself
everyone he
being
loves
killed.
dying himself.
Yeah,
It goes into like this pink and like dark red magenta color.
Yeah.
They're all being hung by meat hooks. And so that keeps distracting the Flash while they're fighting. And then Fallout, the guy who's being used to power the facility.
Yeah, he's like a nuclear man. He has clear skin, and you can see his bones, and he's glowing green.
This is I considered putting in the issue that sets this guy up because basically he's been tortured and is using to power this thing, and he keeps trying to escape, and like the prison system just keeps being like, it's because he's a rogue, it's because he's evil, and it's just because he wants to visit his family's graves that he accidentally killed with his like when he got his nuclear powers, and Wally lets him do that and like is trying to stop him, but then he like talks to him and he lets him do that, and then he forces the prison to like come up with a much more humane way, like because he's still like, I don't want to let these villains go. If I can help keep the villains here, I would like to do that, but I can't be in constant pain. So like Wally works with him to create like a humane way that basically he just like sits there and the building like absorbs the nuclear power without like pulling it out of him. And so he shows up to help.
Yeah, and also we didn't mention the Warden has some magic powers too, where he can like constrict people's muscles, so he's like choking out gorillas like Darth Vader kind of when they're trying
He has
to escape.
like very minor meta powers where he basically can just constrict muscles or relax them.
To me, it's like even though it's minor, that's still a pretty significant
you
power.
can squeeze people's throats.
What he can do is he helps Hunter Zolomon, like he makes his leg not feel bad anymore. Like he pretty much temporarily heals Zolomon's leg, and Zolomon says it feels so good to run again.
But it even says like when he chokes out these gorillas, he doesn't knock them out. He says, "I can buy us 1 second," and then they run away. Like it's not like he's like throwing them around or anything.
Right.
He's no Gorilla Grodd.
Flash is about to lose. Fallout shows up and zaps Grodd just enough time to stall more time for the Flash to. Well, it doesn't really save. It doesn't kill Grodd. Grodd jumps up and grabs Hunter Zolomon as they're
because
escaping.
he recognized him from the Flash's mind as his friend.
And then he breaks him pretty much like Bane. He just lifts him over his head, but rather than knee, just like you hear like scrack and
Yeah.
And now Flash is after Grodd escapes, and Flash is like, I should be mind. Grodd should be allowed to run free. Crazy idea. He should be caged because he's an animal.
He wasn't advocating for him to run free.
He said put him back to Gorilla City.
I know, but he said
Which would
Gorilla City's
make
not
him
fun.
run free.
But he said Gorilla City's an anarchy. Like
This is Africa's problem, not ours.
I know. I guess this is a problem with superheroes in general. Like the Flash is being high and mighty without giving a good solution. But this is him being like, no, now I will conform to my primal rage and go.
Well, no, I think, but that makes it clear. He says after what he did to my friend,
Yeah, I know,
this is
I'm
now
saying.
personal for me. He should be caged.
Yeah, I'm saying this is that transition, like from kind of more higher moral hero to vengeful guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that like that's something
American
we see constantly.
interventionist.
Yeah.
So then we have issue 194 where the Flash runs across
The world.
the Atlantic Ocean to go over into Africa, and then he finds the invisible gorilla city, and
He can vibrate to see them, even though they're
Yeah.
invisible, because they're like...
and they show up. They have like these like because Gorilla City is an advanced city, so they have like techno nets and stuff that they try and capture him with, and they're able to like take words from his mind to speak to him, and they open a door to Gorilla City after they like catch him, and they're like, "Come on, our leader Namdi has been waiting." And then it shows like a 2-panel spread of like Gorilla City, and I feel like I have been reading Divisive issues for this moment to get to the reveal of what is Gorilla City, and I'm like,
We have been making fun of it for years.
it's a bunch of gorillas living in the
It looks just like, if you're a
treetops.
Star Wars fan, it looks just like Kashyyyk.
It does.
That's
It
what
does, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hidden thing that like only some people can see. And it's
Advanced
this
tech
like,
city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he goes there, and then there's all these like big like this mural that he's looking at, and he sees there's Solovar, which I first learned from the Patreon episodes, is the good leader of Gorilla City, and Grodd's the bad leader.
I like how they also painted a guy covering his eyes, a guy covering his ears, a guy covering his mouth. Speak no evil. You know,
and
except it's human.
So Namdi shows up. He's Solovar's son, right? And he's here, and he basically like he just shit talks humans the whole time because he's like, hey, we don't even wear red in the city because we don't like blood, we don't like vengeance, because these are things that like embody humans. This is what humans do.
They're pacifist gorillas.
He accuses the Flash of being obsessed with blood because he's a red costume.
Yeah. And Flash is like, no, I don't wear this to frighten anyone. I don't fight for vengeance. And he says, yet in your voice, mind, and heart, you have come to Gorilla City seeking blood, as all humans do. And he's like, well, Grodd hurt a lot of people.
And then Grodd shows up and is like, I'm here to hurt more people. Fuck you guys.
Yeah, I own this city.
Yeah.
And the other thing with Grodd, too, is like all of his text is in red. So he's like a super evil man. Mm-hmm. And so at first I was like, this is going to be great. There's going to be a psychic gorilla duel going on here. But that doesn't happen because the Flash just decides to fight against Grodd himself. And he's trying to move so fast to like knock him out before he can put in his like psychic nightmares into his head.
They fight and
Flash
And
wins.
basically he's like, look, see, I took him down. I could take him back now. And they're still like, no, like you're still grounded in bloodlust. Like, no. Yeah. And then they just they telekinetically put him to sleep, and then he wakes up in Keystone.
Yes. And then they use Grodd's. They're like, this guy is obsessed with blood. And then they take Grodd's blood and paint a picture of the Flash on their wall, saying, "Fuck humans for being obsessed with blood," as they use the blood to paint a picture.
I like that touch. And
what are they gonna do with them?
To keep them psychically knocked out? Who knows? It's a psychic gorilla city. It's not our business.
So then it cuts to Flash and Keystone, and he goes to visit Hunter. And
Hunter's traumatized by it.
Yeah, Hunter finds out he can't move his legs, and he says, "Why this happened to me?
Yeah.
I made my mistakes, got nowhere to run.
Yeah,
my life goes on. That's fading away."
One of the things I like in between, because we're mentioning just like what Wally's going, where he's going, and what he's doing and stuff. But in between this, there's always constant scenes of like Linda supporting him and Linda hanging out with him that I really enjoy. To let you know, it's like she's a constant presence, and that they work like together a lot.
Yeah. And like when with her and the two cops that I mentioned before, Chire and Murillo, they're like it's more than just like the two cops that Batman will interact in this story. Like they are really part of the cast, and they pop up in pretty much every issue.
Yeah, they're like friends of Flash rather than just like, where Commissioner Gordon's like a friend of Batman, but he's like the quiet, like the men don't cry type of friends where they'll show up at like each other's funerals and that's it, and not talk to anyone. But these guys seem like they want to get to like know each other more.
We have the top issue next, where we basically it starts out with the cops looking and saying, "Look, all the rogues have escaped,"
and it shows you all of them again. And then it cuts to Flash had to spend like because he has to.
He broke his hand fighting
Grodd.
And it kept speed healing, but wrong because it wasn't in a cast or anything. So he has to break it again. To
I really like that idea because I was thinking it's like that probably would happen, right? Because like sometimes you have to go to the hospital so your body doesn't heal incorrectly. And as the Flash, you're healing so fast that it's just healing incorrectly, and it's like done. Before
I wonder how often, characters with like healing factors would.
Well, I mean, he says like I think this was the 14th time he's broken his hand in a month.
Yeah,
and we get a scene of Linda with her OBGYN, and just like she's like something doesn't feel right with this pregnancy, and the doctor's like, we have more tests to do, and she's like, do them please. And like I like the lettering here because when someone's like really upset, like I said, like Scott Collins to me captures the emotion really well, but also like when she says please, the word bubble is like kind of shaky, and it just like everything works together to convey it really well to me.
And just to go back to the doctor with Flash real quick, it's like a cute scene where he talks to because everyone knows Wally's the Flash, so they talk about how Wally's gonna be a dad and stuff before they cut to Linda.
Yeah, and these doctors, the doctor and his wife Tina's actually the love interest from the 1990s Flash TV show because they were early Flash supporting characters, like way before Mark Waid. And like it's cool, like Johns brings in a lot of not just his own characters that he's creating, but like he is something we don't see a lot in modern comics is like he is using characters that were embedded in the franchise. Even like these characters were tossed aside in Wade's run, and it's cool to see them return here.
Yeah, but I want to bring stuff because this happens constantly. I really love the unique aspect of Flash being a public hero, and which is important because that gets undone eventually.
Spoilers, no.
So it cuts to the top, and apparently the top is actually possessed like a politician or something.
So that's a leftover Mark Waid thing. Mark Waid had the tops like after the top died in like the early 80s. Mark Waid had like his spirit take over this guy running for president. So Johns was just keeping like he was revamping his powers, and he will eventually have like he'll just become the regular old top again when his body gets fully taken over. But instead of just throwing that away, he's building off of that Wade concept from like 5 years prior.
This guy is just the saddest. I'm like, I feel sad. It's sort of like with Clive Yorkin, where I'm like, I just feel bad for this guy.
So
although this guy's
actually,
like possessed by an evil thing. Go ahead.
I think you guys will appreciate this. Do you know why the top is so crazy? Because it's revealed in the arc right after, like by the end of Johns' run, one of his later day stories, we read Identity Crisis, right, when they mind wiped Dr. Light. The Flash came right after Iris died, like right after this. Barry brought the top to Zatanna and said, I want you to do it again. This time I want you to make him good. And it drove him mad, having this like he was like, oh, my brain chemistry now is telling me to be a good person, but I have all this blood on my hands, and it drove him insane. And that's why he's like this.
That's neat.
That was how the Flash tied into Identity Crisis, which I think is pretty neat.
That's pretty interesting.
But this guy looks like a St. Patty's Day criminal.
Yes.
Like
because
he's wearing a straight jacket. But he
has a green straight,
Yeah, he's got like a green hat on, and he's always drooling and licking his snot. It's real nasty.
And so he attacks. There's a mayor having like a memorial event, and he attacks the mayor, and he's like, I want to run for mayor. I guess I have to kill you to take your job. And the Flash goes to fight him, but he uses his vertigo powers to...
because the vertigo powers are new. He used to just spin really fast, which in the modern age is like a pretty dumb power. So now they're like, he can make your world spin, which is better. That's a better power for a speedster.
So,
Yeah.
so Flash runs to he's getting like nauseous, so he runs to Zalman, and he like throws up in his hospital bathroom.
Yeah, and Zolman's looking at a picture of himself with some lady. Well,
Yeah.
before the Flash shows up, and then he's like, "Oh, sorry, I see you're looking better." And he's like, "I feel worse."
Yeah, so Zalman's very clearly bitter.
Very bitter.
Flash is here to ask him, how do I beat the new Tom? And he's just like, Zalman's like, close your fucking eyes. And Flash is like, oh, okay. And he just closes.
It's not quite that rude. Like
it's not that far removed because Zalman is very snippy with the Flash.
Well, he says Flash is like he's scrambling the way my eyes interpret images, and then he says, "Then just close your eyes." And he's like, "What?"
And then Wally like smirks. Like they're still, I think they're friendly, and I like the pacing that Johns uses a lot because, like, I feel like a lot of writers would spend way less time on this because this is just a quiet like conversation between the two of them, and they spend 2 full pages, so we get things like when he's psychoanalyzing the Top, and he's like he's unable to see others as equal, we're all toys to him, and then he's like I was to Grodd, and Hunter like gets really upset, and then it has Wally like with his eyes closed, and the way the layouts are that's like the background is his eyes closed and the panels are superimposed on top of it, and I like the way Collins uses layout to like convey this kind of pacing thing, that like the overall tone that this page takes is Wally looking at his friend sadly, but everything else is superimposed on top of it. And I like that John spends 2 full pages with just like them talking as friends and coworkers.
We also I should mention that when normally the boxes are very flat and like typical like standard comic style. Then when the Top uses vertical powers, the panels start getting warped more. Which was a nice touch as well.
Yeah, you start seeing like people upside down or on the side.
So then Flash runs back, closes his eyes, and punches the fuck out of the Top.
Yeah, playtime's over.
And then it cuts to Wally meeting Linda in the hospital, and she's
first there's just a quick scene of the Rogues just like hanging out and working on their like gadgets and drinking.
You
beer
can kill
and
any
watching
musician
TV.
in the world. Who would it be? It's like ABBA, all of them. Cold. I already said ABBA.
And the reason why I think this is funny is because like it shows that they're just like drinking beers and hanging out, and Wally is on TV and he's like, a warning to all the other rogues who are stupid enough to stay in the Twin Cities. Your days are numbered, and they're all just laughing at the TV. Like that's what I mean about the old school rogues, like the classic rogues, the one we're going to talk about next week, is like they're that like more jovial hanging out.
Yeah, it reminded
like,
me of them
family
pissing on Professor Zoom's
Yeah,
grave.
exactly. That's the kind of thing that like.
It's not the same trickster, right?
No, this is the new trickster.
That's what I thought, and I want to point out because this is a nice touch. Because when I mentioned ABBA, then the trickster says, "Who's ABBA?" And I thought, because I knew there was a second trickster at some point. And I'm like, oh, that's a nice way to show that this is a new trickster.
He's also playing Game Boy. That's how you know he's a kid.
Yeah. Well, the trickster went clean, and he worked for the FBI. So Johns introduced this new young trickster, and it's a fun way to rebuild the rogues, because since he's young. And, like, there's a lot of arcs when he's first introduced. There's a lot of character work where the rogues are like, just because you have the trickster's, like, tricks and, like, gear, that doesn't make you a rogue. You have to earn it. And it's a lot about, like, this basically gang initiations for this kid who doesn't have anywhere else to go, trying to convince this, like, older crime family to take him in. And I think that there's a lot to be like, I think there's a lot to explore there that I think Johns does pretty well.
I just want to point that out because I appreciate, like, with one line, like, even as we're reading this out of without reading anything else, I could tell that was the new trickster probably because that one line.
And, like, when you have a book like Johns' Flesh, there's so many characters, and, like, aside from the gorillas, to me, it's always pretty clear who everybody is and how they fit into the larger puzzle.
Gorilla.
So,
I mean, like, it's hard to tell the gorillas apart, but, like, you
I
can
know,
tell
it's
every
just the
character.
Gorilla Grodd.
aside from the gorillas, okay. So cutting to the hospital.
Do you know when I saw them parachuting out of the plane, I was like, I'm gonna stop reading this right now.
I was
Go back to
thinking,
it.
because Phil had just messaged us. He's like, I don't know how I can go from like liking the Flash so much to disliking it. I'm like, it must have been that scene or something.
I love last week's stuff so much.
Yeah. So it cuts to turns out somebody was brought up with Linda's pregnancy as they go to the hospital to meet with Linda, and it turns out she's actually having twins.
Yeah.
Wow. And now it's like, oh, that's nice, because I like that they have twins.
And then it cuts to Hunter Zolomon in the same hospital. He hears somebody yelling.
He's telling himself, he's like, move, damn you. He's like trying to focus on himself to move. And then he hears like a clang.
Well, and he's punching himself in the legs. Like he's trying to make his legs move.
Yeah, then it cuts to, he wheels over to somebody's yelling, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to see him. He's my father. And it's Peekaboo visiting her dying father. And police are swarming her.
So the next issue is starts with Peekaboo beating up the cops, and the art style changed here. Different artists, I assume.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, it's a guest artist, Phil Winslade.
It's very different. It's more like
I don't like this artist.
It's more noir. I feel like
more noir.
It makes sense you wouldn't like it because I'm like, this is very different tonally than what we were dealing with.
A lot of shadows instead of no shadows.
Yep.
Yeah.
I liked it, but again, I dislike the other one so much. I'm like, this is nice, I guess. I wasn't like I am in love with this. And basically they're talking about Peekaboo, and they give us the backstory of like, oh, your father needed a kidney transplant and there wasn't a kidney, so she tried to,
Yeah, they recap like what I was saying before.
A security guard tries to like knock her out with his police baton, and then as he's going to do that, Hunter Zolomon's like, wait, don't hit her, because whenever she gets like physically touched by anyone,
she teleports.
That's when she teleports and explodes. Yeah. And so she blows up like the hallway. And
this is where Hunter starts talking to Flash about this thing he heard about. He's like, I read this thing about this thing called the Cosmic Treadmill.
Yeah, he's like us, where it's like, if there's this problem, like, if I want to fix this thing that happened to me when I was younger, could you run back in time? Because he says, I just need, like, you to fix 1 hour. I just made one mistake that led me down this life to me being, like, disabled. And if you just fix that issue, like, it'll be great.
And unlike Barry Allen, Wally's like, you can't just time travel, you'll fuck everything up.
Yeah, he knows you can't just do that. And he's like, fuck the theories and the paradoxes. And he's like, this isn't a theory. Like,
yeah, I'm your friend. And he says, have you eever heard of Eobard Thawne? And he's like, Professor Zoom?
Yeah. And then they talk about, killing him. And he's like,
Barry was defending himself. There's no choice. And then that's where Zolomon's like, that's not what you said at the trial, though, is that you were saying there was another way. He had the power to stop him. And he says, Flash is like, or Wally's like, today I would probably do the same thing my uncle did. Sometimes a split-second decision has to be made.
Yeah, and Hunter's like, I don't give a shit. Just do this for me. Promise me I'll walk again. He's like, I can't do that. And he's like, I just need you to do this. And he's like, Hunter says to Flash, you don't know tragedy. You've
never had any personal tragedy. Yeah. You don't know what I'm going through. And Flash says, I have had tragedy. He says, a bolt of lightning turned you into the fastest man alive. You have a beautiful wife. You're adored by the city and the world as a hero. Your life has been anything but tragic.
This is why I love Hunter, because I've seen so many people do this where it's like, you don't know what I'm going through. Fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, if you knew how I felt, you would help me.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to say. He just leaves after that.
Yeah, and I feel like that. I appreciate that, because that's always like my complaint about like a lot of superheroes, is that they do live very like charmed and great lives, even if they face like the tragedy and stuff. It's like Hunter Zolomon's alone now. He's never going to be able to walk again, and all he can do is like with his life is study these like psychopaths and serial killers and be like, well, here's how we stop them. He's telling this to a person the city adores, and that's going to get all the credit for stopping them.
Yeah. And like Wally's like, I've had tragedy. My uncle died, and like everybody has dead uncles without the good stuff that he has.
Yeah, they don't have a museum dedicated to just them.
Exactly.
And so Iris shows up, and she's like,
it's Linda, but she
Linda.
brought cake from us.
Oh, that's me. Okay, thank God.
We're talking about Barry. Yeah, Linda shows up, and
And she basically just explained that talk about the twins, but they say like they haven't made it public that she's pregnant with twins at all yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know as the reader, but the family doesn't know.
Yeah,
like nobody knows but us and the couple.
But then they get interrupted because the
Peekaboo comes back to the hospital to grab her
dad. Body's rejecting the kidney.
Yeah, so Peekaboo goes back to save her father, and she's like, "Get away from my dad!" And Flash is like, "Hold on, you need the doctor to take care of him." And she's like, "No, fuck you." She takes him. Dad teleport.
So I really like her power, and I think it's really like interesting. It's kind of dark because she gets to a point later on where she teleports out, and like Barry, goddamn, Wally's trying. He's telling her it's like, don't run. And she's like, that's all I can do right now. All I was trying to do was just like save my dad. I wanted to be like a hero originally. I wanted to help people.
She says, like, do you know why I got these powers? It wasn't to become a supervillain, to become a superhero. I wanted to be like you, basically.
Yeah.
But she says, but you guys labeled me a rogue just because I was trying to help.
Yeah, and while this is happening, Wally like touches her, and then she blows up again, and she knocks Linda, who's there, into an ambulance. And he's like, "Oh my God, please, she's pregnant!" And then she says, or he tries to say she's pregnant, and Peekaboo kicks him in the face, and he's like, "Please get her to the doctors." And she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna do this." But I'm not doing this.
Well, that's what she says. You don't know me at all. I wanted to be a hero. Of course, I'm going to help her.
Yeah, and she says, she says, like, you didn't help me, so I'm not doing this for you, Flash. I'm doing this because I want to help this woman. Fuck you.
Yeah. And I think like she's a really like interesting character. I really hate that sometimes before she does like she teleports and explodes, she says Peekaboo. And I get like that's to like connect you to her name. I just almost wish she just had like a regular name and she didn't say Peekaboo before.
I think
she
have her
everyone
to
up.
have people like in superhero movies they label like the villains like in the newspapers and stuff like Doc was like a newspaper name. It's another thing to just have her say Peekaboo when she
at least she doesn't say it the last time, which makes it weirder that she said it the other times.
When she teleports away with her dad, and there's that point where I was like, maybe she's saying it to get people away from her to let them know she's gonna explode, but still like Peekaboo's a weird way to say I'm gonna blow up.
Yeah, you say stay clear.
Like stay clear or something. Peekaboo.
Yeah.
So thankfully it turns out that Iris was fine.
Linda.
Damn it! No.
Iris hasn't even been in this book the whole
I know,
time.
but it's just like we just think the Flash's wife.
It's only because she said Iris said you could use some cake and brought some cake.
Yeah,
I
also was shocked.
Derailed.
I was shocked Iris was here. By the way, I know you guys mentioned her coming back, but I was like, oh, she's just like part of the team.
She's
now,
the Flash family now with Jay and Jay's wife.
Yeah. So then it cuts back, and Wally's with Linda at home, and they're talking about like Peekaboo turned herself in, and he's like, and Linda's like, yeah, without her father, there wasn't anything left for her to fight for because he didn't make it. Mm-hmm. And Wally's like, I wish I could have helped her. Like my track record's really like in the pits. Like everybody I care about is like dying. And Linda's like, well, you can't save everyone. Maybe it's time we get the whole family together to help cheer you up. Let's do it. Let's announce that we're gonna have babies. Mm-hmm. And Wally's really happy about that.
And then there's this dark scene, the singer at the end, Krakoom, outside the Flash Museum. Guess who's wheeling through the halls? It's Hunter Zolomon. And he sees like a big statue like Gorilla Grodd, and it freaks him out, and he like cringes over it.
Yeah.
And
I also think this is the best, where the art works the most, because a lot of the coloring in this issue is still colorful despite the more dark art style. This is when the coloring matches the more inky, heavy dark style.
And he sees, lit by light, the cosmic treadmill.
I cannot believe they have a working cosmic treadmill sitting here.
That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, this is one of the most like powerful weapons in this universe.
I agree with you. That is ridiculous. However, the only reason why he knows how to do anything with it is because he has top secret FBI files on the device. So it's not like you could just do it. He has to take it apart. He reprograms it. It seems like pretty complicated.
But the thing is, for me, in this world where it seems like every other superhero is actually a super scientist wizard, I'm like, this is just a terrible idea.
You're asking for
like the girl's not can read minds. Girl's can find out about this treadmill and be like, okay, just gotta.
He can read like Wally's mind.
I'm gonna go ahead. I've always interpreted the scene that it's broken because Wally's never like. I think the last time I've seen it used is the Return of Barry Allen, like 100 issues ago. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that it doesn't work. And he fixes it.
He does
fix it, but if it's so easily fixable by a guy who's never seen it before.
No, but he's had paperwork on it. He's studied the Flash and his villains. He knows all about Professor Zoom. Like
maybe then it's like if a guy can acquire the paperwork to fix the cosmic treadmill.
I mean, but again, he only acquired it because he worked for the FBI as a specialist in metahuman analysis. Like I feel like there's a lot of barriers of entry for him to clear to get access to this information. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, either way, he puts his wheelchair on it and he goes to the future.
No, he doesn't. He blows up.
Yeah, it blows up. It's the second.
He doesn't go to the past. It just blows up.
Before he goes, it shows in the background, like as he's going to get on it, there's Professor Zoom standing up, like a Professor Zoom picture, and then he presses a button, and then you see like all the numbers. He's trying to set the date for when he needs to go back to like 1998, and then as the treadmill starts, you hear like clang. You just see it completely like fall apart and blow up into a giant like.
That's the thing. It also he doesn't fix it and use it. It's not a work. It's clearly not a working time machine.
Yeah,
it explodes.
But it's still like tapped into the Speed Force as like a thing.
It doesn't tap into Speed Force, spoilers, but next issue
taps into
cover
time.
is if the hinting wasn't obvious enough last time. Next issue has a cover of Reverse Flash on it.
You must read this story of Flash's greatest adversary, the origin of Zoom.
Blitz, the origin of Zoom. And then I was like, oh my god, Ryan lied to me. He said Professor Zoom would never come back, but I'm staring at him.
At the end of every one of these things, there's just
I am legit, Ryan, actually hoping Professor Zoom or someone Zoom related shows up for this final arc.
I hope Zoom just erases me from existence.
So this issue is pretty much like the Hunter Zolomon origin story, since now he's going to become Zoom, and starts with who fits the profile. It's like his narration, and he talks like all of his narrations about like how he used to spend his days trying to like analyze minds and motivations. When he go to like a crime scene, he need the statistic of like every murderer to try and fit their personalities, like how they were with their parents, what kind of like color gag they used to stuff people's mouths with. And
he got on this path because his dad killed his mom. And he couldn't. No one knew why. Like they apparently were like in a weird relationship where they never talked. He never talked to them. They had like very estranged relationship.
As he's expositing, he can only say like, I remember the machine breaking apart when he used the cosmic treadmill and the big flashlight, and then he just woke up back in the hospital in his bed again. And he said, some would say I'm lucky to be alive, but like I need to repair my life to make it better. And he goes to like get a cup of water, but it knocks it off the bureau. And so then he talks about his parents and how he grew up alone, and that like his dad, it seemed like his dad would never like let his mother talk. Like they both like valued quiet in the house.
Well, from the art, I think it's pretty clear that he valued quiet and she felt trapped.
Yeah.
She looks very downtrodden.
And so
it turns out
the year he graduated high school, he returns back home, and then his mother finally talked, and she told the police where the 5 missing girls from last summer had gone, in the ground behind our garage. And then his father finds out, he murders the mother with an axe, and then the police came in, and he doesn't like stop there. Again, this is where it's like it shows like the blood on the father and stuff, and this is where I'm just like, man, this is a really dark scene of like the father murdering the mother. It doesn't show that, but it shows him with like the bloody axe as police are coming in and he's about to murder them too.
And then stuff is not colorful at all. It's all in this like yellow sepia like flashback tone, so it's not bright.
This art style worked for me more because of the fact that there was no color in it. Even though the face.
Do you hate the artist or the color?
That's a good question. I wonder if it's still like I do wish it was like shaded more, I guess. Like, but with the lack of color, it didn't look as cartoony to me. Like when the cops are busting in.
Interesting.
It's like, again, still a little cartoony, but without any bright colors. It's like
it kind of reminds me of when people are like, "Man, I hate the direction of this movie. It was so bad." And sometimes it's like you hate the editor or you hate like the people that retouch a film rather than necessarily the director of the film, even if they call the shots.
That's possible.
So his dad was a serial killer, and he basically Hunter Zolomon decides he wants to understand why his dad was the way he was.
Well, he also says like it shows him watching the police department celebrating that they finally caught him, and he said no one knew why my father did it. They didn't care. They were just glad the monster was gone. But I cared. I wanted to know why he did it. I wanted to understand him in order to stop anyone else like him. And like I find that really interesting. Of like the cops are addressing just the symptom and not the cause, so they have no interest in preventing it from happening again. They're just like, oh, problem solved. And I like that as the motivation a lot for a profiler.
He's in college and he meets a girl. Also, that scene where he sees her for the first time, that again reminds me of a webcomic face. Like that face when he sees her, it's like he has no eyes, it's just like the one.
Oh, yeah.
And he falls in love.
He mentions too, like he sees her because he loved running. He was at like he was on track team and he was running. And he says that was like I did something I never did before. I tripped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they start dating, and then he meets her dad, who was a professor.
And this is the man he truly falls in love with.
Yeah.
Because the professor's a leading expert of the mind of the supervillain. And so he came up with a lot of these theories, the uber god complexes, advanced isolation syndrome. And then they go to the house and, like, she would be embarrassed about, like, how much her dad would talk about this, but he loved listening to her father talk.
This is what it's like when Ariel and I talk to her dad.
How often do superheroes' girlfriends have, like, dads who are really important? I feel like it's
like,
a lot, right?
I don't know.
Oh,
Modern
dads,
era,
they're
modern
really
era,
important.
modern-
I feel like the dads are almost always like, I love my wife, and her dad is like, I always feel like they're really important. You never see stuff about the girlfriends' moms being in
I
stories.
feel like the girlfriends' dads are almost always villains.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. They're just like they are
like
important in the
Thunderbolt
story.
Ross, like
Right.
that Hulk archetype.
Yeah, yeah. Or in
But, like, he's
Spider-Man.
Yeah. Hunter's best man is his father-in-law. What a
He's my
fucking
best
nerd,
friend.
man.
I love you, Dad. You're the dad I never had.
Yeah.
But I think that's also the implication here.
Yeah.
Is that his father never spoke a word to him and never he mentions, like, he used to listen to his parents fight and they never once mentioned his name, and he was nothing in the eyes of his parents, and his father was a serial killer, and now his father-in-law talks to him for hours and is interested in what he has to say and is telling him important things and appreciates him as a son. Like, I think that surrogate father theme is very clear
yeah,
here.
I agree.
So, this is really something really stupid. The professor dad brings up Eobard Dawn in class, and I noticed he looks exactly like the fat man that Iris possessed. So for a second, I was like, "Is this Iris in disguise?" But no, it's just he's just talking about this case about how Allen, the Barry Allen case, the trial of Barry Allen, basically.
Yeah, the Eobard Thawne was a classic stalker.
Yeah.
Because he loved Barry Allen and he was obsessed with him.
In the middle of all this, he's calling for the nurse, but no one comes in real time. And then we go back to flashback again.
They talk about, like, the trial of Barry Allen.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how he became a guy who goes after low-level metahumans and costume criminals. And he was going after a guy called the Clown.
Yeah, that he's intentionally supposed to be, like, a campy, like, he's
dressed up as a clown. It's Joker from the end of the Joker movie.
Yeah. But he says, like, so it's them, like, about to raid his house, and the dad's like, what do you think? And Hunter's like, he's always used the typical murder toys, you know, poison cream pies, laughing gas.
He calls him Dad, which is a touch I really enjoy.
Yeah. He's a kid playing a grown-up game. He doesn't want to face his adult life. I say we go. He won't have a gun. And his wife's like, Hunter. And he's like, trust me, Ashley. He will not be armed. And the dad thinks about it, and he's like, let's do it. And in the dad's glasses is Hunter and Ashley. And I like that he's like Ashley looks kind of mad, and Hunter's like, yeah, Dad trusts me.
I love you, Dad.
And then it turns out that Hunter was wrong, and the Clown had a gun.
Yeah, he breaks in, Clown shoots him in the head, shoots Hunter in the leg, and then Ashley shows up, cries over the father's body, and then shoots the Clown dead. And then after that, that's when Ashley left him, and then he was left to go to the Keystone Police Department.
Yeah, he got let go by the FBI, and he got this job in Keystone.
And now these are the few seconds he keeps saying, I just want to go back, fix these few seconds, and my life is fixed.
It is really tragic. I'm like, this guy was murdering people. Like, I don't know why you'd assume he wouldn't have a gun, but I guess if you're like, I know my stuff.
If he's murdering him with, like, prank toys, maybe I.
But they found 6
Even if
electrocuted
he had
people.
a prank murder weapon, he could still kill somebody with a prank murder weapon.
Yeah.
Like,
6 electrocuted people before they. Well, whatever.
No, I think it's a valid point because Hunter was an idiot because just because he has goofy killer weapons, he still could kill people with those goofy killer weapons.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like the Geoff Johns thing that Ryan was mentioning earlier, where it's like the campiness versus the serious modern stuff, where it's like, this guy's going to be campy and fun. He won't kill us.
Yeah, but, like, that's the point, is Hunter is so confident, and he says it was my ego. I was so sure that we wouldn't have a problem. And, like, he was wrong. So even if those lethal cream pies could have killed him, he still, like, it would have been the same outcome. But having him explicitly be wrong, like, in his exact analysis, I think is important.
Yep.
So Hunter realizes in the hospital, back in modern day, Hunter realizes in the hospital room that the water he knocked over was still floating in midair, that he can start walking again.
Yeah, my legs, I can feel my legs, I can move them. And he's like, nurse, someone. He walks outside and everything's like frozen. And he's like, it's all making sense. When the cosmic treadmill blew up, it did something to me. And the glass of water, the friction on my skin, that humming sound, is this what it's like to be the Flash?
Yeah. it's pretty cool. And as he's walking to his hospital gown just starts to catch fire because he's going so fast.
Yeah.
And this is when he starts to think, if this is really happening, it's a sign. I tried to tell the Flash before, the best heroes are the heroes who will take risks to help people, who have faced unbelievable tragedy and understand why it must be prevented at any cost.
Yeah. I've been given a gift I can pass on to the Flash. In order for him to become stronger, he must face the ultimate tragedy.
He becomes Professor Zoom.
Yep, he
becomes just Zoom. He's not a professor.
Because he looks at his last name, Zolomon.
He didn't get his fucking professor in college.
Well, it's not because his name has the letters for
Zoom. He says who fits the profile. He asks, just like he asked at the beginning of the issue, and he's like, Zoom is the only one.
Yeah, because he says like Professor Zoom wanted to replace the Flash. He was obsessed with him. He was a classic stalker, and like, who fits the profile for who should be the Flash's nemesis? I do. Zoom. And he has it still looks mostly the same costume. It's the yellow Flash costume, but the big difference that when you can tell it it's Zoom is he has black lenses over his eyes with like the red like Grodd eye circles in them.
Yeah, it's the red like pinprick dot eyes. And
so I have a question for you guys. Did you like this issue?
Yeah, until the end I did. I don't like the idea of him being like, well, I'm going to teach the Flash a lesson by becoming a supervillain.
Okay,
I liked the backstory stuff and the tragedy.
The backstory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I like the issue. I like this backstory behind Zoom, and I actually in these next like 3 issues, I like Zoom more than Professor Zoom quite a bit.
I do too.
I do as well.
I think Zoom's really neat. I just find his reasoning very tenuous, and I wish that had been better.
Okay.
Like explored, because I'm like, I like the idea of him being like, not like an evil asshole to become Zoom and like torture them. He's like, I want him to experience tragedy, and so that he knows that he has to take more risks to save people. I'm like, it just, I don't know. It's like one of those things where, again, the reasoning is you could look at Hunter Zolomon and say that he's so low and he's so unhinged that to him this is a logical like conclusion for him to make. Mm-hmm. But for me, I almost wish like rather than this, it was instead he was going to be Zoom and torture Wally until Wally went back in time to fix his problem. I'm like, that would be like a neater premise, because right now he's just like, I'm going to exist to like propel his character arc. I'm going to push his character arc in a better direction, and the only way I can do that is by just killing those closest to him, which I'm like,
that's kind of how I read it. Not so much that like he's explicitly torturing for this, but I think he wants to torture him bad enough that he realizes that
the next time it comes up, he wants him to, like, the next time it comes up where it's like, you should use the cosmic treadmill. This time he'll do it rather than be like, we can't take unnecessary risks. It's just like,
and that's the same kind of thing, because he said like he became a profiler because he didn't want another serial killer dad.
To me, I feel like I would need a little more emphasis on him self-sacrificing to make sure people learn a lesson, and then I could buy him being Zoom rather than, a profiler who wants to understand why. And now he's like, now I will be the reason why. It didn't, like, it was loose to me. It kind of reminded me of the Professor Zoom stuff we read last time, where it's like, I'm actually coming back in time and I'm going to become Barry Allen, so then Barry Allen can never kill Professor Zoom because he doesn't exist anymore, where I'm like, this is a little like loosey for me.
I felt the same, where like it seems kind of also very extreme. Like I was actually comparing this. There's a character in Battlestar who gets disabled and like is very bitter afterwards, and he goes down a very dark path like Hunter Zolomon. But it's like I felt like his. I don't want to spoil too much, but like his justification was like I could buy it. It would be like if if Wally had teamed up with Gorilla Grodd after, and then you're like, I get why he's mad about this. But being like, well, he doesn't understand tragedy, so I'm going to become like the worst supervillain in the world and torture his family.
In Battlestar, it was more emotional. Here it's completely clinical. Like I was kind of surprised he never goes after Grodd at all. Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, Grodd also, I mean, he doesn't know where he is.
I know, but he never even thinks about it. He doesn't bring it up. Saying, I wish I could just go kick Grodd's ass.
Yeah.
But he immediately is like, I gotta be the villain now. Like it's a very clinical decision he makes.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of Hunter's character, like I understand why he would take a more clinical approach.
But his whole thing was after he broke his legs, he was more emotional too.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. The main reason why I asked, not so much to get a pulse check on the rest of the story, but more so because Johns does a lot of these backstory centric profiles, like these rogue profiles that they're earlier in the run. They're framed as like half narrator from the character and half Hunter's files. And the reason why I was curious is because next episode is basically that for the classic rogues. So I was just, especially because Scott Collins does a lot of the art, I was hoping after how much you guys hated it so far that this issue was like okay, because you're gonna have to read several more of them.
Yeah. I'm good with backstory stuff. I watched plenty of anime, and they love their stupid backstory dumps.
Yeah, I was also fine with it, probably for the same reason.
So now we're up to the real climax, the last couple issues.
The real blitz, you might say.
Yeah, I don't know why I would say that. That's not a normal colloquial phrase.
Jay, Garrick, and Wally run over to the Flash Museum and get some background info on how Jay was kind of like his dad figure. And they see the Flash Museum completely destroyed.
That's the other thing I appreciated too, is now that like Zoom's a threat, it's like, I better get Jay Garrick here just to hang out for fun. I'm like, that's not what's gonna happen.
Well, I mean, he's the only other Flash around, and the Flash Museum was destroyed. I feel like
I'm
care.
saying because like this is obviously setting it up for like Jay to get his ass handed to him by Zoom.
I see.
He's getting ready to get Yamcha or
Good job.
Yeah.
So they show up, and
Flash Museum is destroyed, and like Wally goes through the ashes and he finds like the Flash, aka Barry Allen, and Jay tells him, it's like, it's just statues, Wally. Memories never die.
Yeah.
And so Linda talks to Iris what's going on, and she complains that everyone keeps confusing her for Iris. And they basically they introduce they didn't introduce, but they introduced to Ryan and Daryl.
To Ryan and Daryl. I mean, like, who is Impulse?
Daryl and Phil, sorry.
So the story where Iris comes back from the future, she basically, so from the future, this is Barry's grandson, Bart. And basically, he's like, he's a character that I really, really love. And Mark Waid created him.
His
with,
grandson?
Mark yeah, because they come from the future. Iris shows up and is basically like, this kid, he was hyper aging because he was like a speedster grandkid.
Oh, okay.
And he was raised pretty much in like VR. Like they basically had to matrix him because he was aging so quickly. So she brings him back in time and is basically like, this kid sucks. He's so annoying. He never shuts the fuck up. He's your problem now.
Bart basically becomes Impulse. And Impulse is my favorite Flash because he's kind of the Flash that everyone assumes the Flash acts like. Yeah. In the Justice League cartoon and the Justice League movie, they made Wally and Barry the funny man of the team. That's really Bart. Bart's the only funny Flash.
And the thing that's great about Bart, like Bart's whole time, he's basically raised by Max Mercury, the Zen master of Speed Guy, because Wally's like, I'm not ready to be a dad. And that's one of the reasons why at this point, and that was like a long time ago, and that's why this development, I always talk about Wally's overarching development, and it's that when Bart first came back, Wally was like, I am still a kid, Linda and I are just starting to figure out what we are, I can't raise this kid, and he passes the buck onto the other speedsters that we met last week, and now he's more willing to like he's now coming to terms with the fact that like he can be a father, but he's not like just shunting Bart to the side. He still wants Bart to be there and part of the family, and like that's what I mean about like the Flash family that Waid was getting ready to develop.
Yeah. And so this is when Wally meets up with them, Wally and Jay, and they announce that they're
we're gonna be parents, and Jay's like, you're having a baby, and everyone else is really happy for them, and Linda's like, oh, we're having twins, and Bart's like, you're gonna be a dad? Those poor kids.
Yeah.
Then we have Jessie Quick, who's the daughter of Johnny Quick. And
she basically acts exactly like Johnny was, like too busy doing business stuff. And she's like, sorry, I can't be there to announce for your baby announcement, so I gotta do work, sorry, over the phone. And she hangs up on Wally.
Wally makes a great comment, like, you literally could have run here in the time it took us to talk on the phone.
And then Linda and Wally kiss, and then there's this green apparition figure in the side that says, love, remember it. And immediately I was like,
I knew,
is that the
like,
Spectre?
I was like, it must be the Spectre, especially Geoff Johns too. I was like,
well, because one thing, like Johns had the year prior just made Hal Jordan the Spectre, so I think he was like, gotta use him enough so people get used to it.
I knew he was a Spectre. I forgot it was Hal.
I didn't know how, because we read all the Green Lantern stuff so long ago where I was like, I don't remember when that was. So I was just like, it's a Spectre. Is that Hal? I'm not sure. And then you hear this, a big boom, and Wally immediately knows it's a sonic boom.
Yeah, and it's not Professor Zoom.
Zoom.
Associate degree Zoom, snapping his fingers, and causing
creating sonic
This is
booms.
Zoom's move. This is like Zoom's trademark move, is he snaps his fingers and creates sonic booms.
That's cool.
Which I think is visually really cool.
Yeah, because you just see the two panels of him holding out his hand to snap his fingers, and then just again like the big boom. You see birds flying, and then everyone has to run and see what's happening. And then you get.
And this is where we see a lot more of that Scott Collins architecture. Like these buildings are all super detailed, even for small panels.
Yes,
and I think that's just it. When you're writing a story that's supposed to be building the city as a major character, like when we're talking about like the politics of the city.
Good point.
I think that's really important to have an artist that puts detail into the city.
And this scene, it's all about, because the boom starts destroying buildings, so it's all about Wally and Jay trying to save people as the structural damage starts occurring.
Yeah, so it's a very Zoom thing. He's destroying a building in construction.
Yeah. And they tell Bart to stay behind because Wally hates him. And and then as Jay and Wally are saving people, Jay hears somebody saying very fast.
I'm gonna say wait. You're like, what? And then Jay just gets hit. And this is I think my favorite thing about Zoom, other than him not being an asshole, but instead being a guy that's like, this is for your own good. It's that when he first appears, like usually you see the Flash stuff, it's like all the lines drawn between like all the like images, the ghost images of him. When Zoom first appears, you don't see him at all. Yeah. And you're like, oh, this guy must be really fast.
This also reminded me of
can't
anime a lot, where they're like, he's so fast you can't even keep your eyes on him, where he just like knocks you away, and you're like, what the hell?
And I like the affectation that it's pretty clear that he's like not fully in control, because like not like someone's controlling him, but every time we do see him, he's vibrating really, really quick, and his words are so slurred together and so fast that like you have to slow down to read them.
Flash. You're like,
and like
what?
I think that's a really cool touch for a character's like vocal cord.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought this when it explains Pat especially, this is how Reverse Flash should have functioned.
It's also like this is a really cool way to bring back Reverse Flash for not just like, hey, how you doing, Wally? Anyway, I'm gonna be an asshole and just make your life harder. Instead, it's like it's someone using the imagery of what the Reverse Flash represented, which was like this terrible force that you had to fight at full power to stop.
And part of the reason why he adopts this insignia is because Barry knew. Like he says, like Barry, he doesn't say it now, but he like implies it earlier that like Barry knew sometimes you have to cross the line. Like you have to kill your enemy. He killed Reverse Flash, where Wally he didn't kill Grodd. He doesn't cross the line that Barry crossed. And who made Barry cross the line? Reverse Flash.
And so the only word that Wally can make out is Zoom is dead. Zoom. His name is Zoom, and Wally says Zoom is dead.
Zoom says, not anymore. All of Zoom's text, too, besides like being like truncated words, is that it's a single word that he's saying all the letters are smushed together.
Yeah, and then he says, not anymore, and he goes, basically, last panel is him in front of Iris. As
Linda.
Shit! No!
That's okay.
Just assume it's always Linda. Iris
No.
is not
We're not saying, it's just like a subconscious thing.
Yeah. Because they look pretty different. They're not even the same race.
There's no similarity between Iris. It's just we think we're saying fucking Linda, but we're saying Iris.
Yeah.
Iris. So he's in front of Linda, and we do get some exposition at the start of the next issue where he says he's having a hard time being so fast.
Speed hard to adjust perceptions. I am Zoom.
Wally, his friend, I'm helping him face fear. Then we see a kid jump in with his suit.
It's Impulse.
Must be Impulse. And he also can't keep up with him. And he says, Zoom says, fastest boy alive. Zoom, fastest man alive.
The thing that I really like about, like, even the way you frame that, like, even though it was a little glib of just, like, must be Impulse, it felt very natural to me why all these characters were in the same place.
Yeah.
And I like that they were introduced as, like, here's Wally's whole family, here are the characters that matter, so that when all these superheroes show up, it's for a purpose.
Yeah.
It's because Wally invited them all here for this interpersonal reason, not just it's time for the big team up. Like, even though that is what plot it serves, it feels very natural that we now had exposition where we got to know all these characters out of costume first, even if it was just a couple pages. And that I think that that's really effective, that now when Impulse is here, Jay is here, they talked about Jesse already. I don't feel like, I guess these people are showing up now. It feels like they're here on purpose.
Yeah, he hangs out with speedsters all day, so it's like...
Yeah.
And so as Impulse is fighting, getting his ass kicked by...
It's not a fight, yeah.
Yeah. He's getting his ass kicked by Reverse Flash. All of a sudden, like, these rifts appear in, like, reality, like, they show random images, and Bart sees himself in the Kid Flash costume. Spoilers. Geoff Johns goes on to make Bart into the next Kid Flash, replacing Wally West's old identity. And but it's like this is him teasing it, I guess. But more importantly, basically they reveal that these are actually rips in the time stream, basically.
Yeah.
And I like that Linda goes. She takes a knife and she goes to help Bart, and she's like, "Stop it! Stop it!" You see the knife disappear, and then the next panel, Linda's just gone.
Yeah, and Bart's just there, like, broken on the ground.
Yep, and then the Flash is helping Jay get up, and they're talking about, and they're like, hey, this guy can't, like, slow down, it seems. And it seems like he's someone new tapping into the Speed Force. And then Zoom shows up once more. There's a whole bunch of cops there. They all point their guns at him. Then all the guns are gone, and all the cops are being knocked out.
I wasn't sure if he was snapping your necks because it has a crack sounding effect. But
I just figured it was, like, punching.
Yeah.
So Wally's like, hey, remember when I taught you how to steal speed, Jay? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, let's do it. And they're running around him trying to steal his speed, but it's just not working.
Yeah. But they're not fast enough to fight him. He's just kicking their asses.
And I love that he just trips Wally.
Yeah.
You love Wally being tripped.
It's just funny. I think Speedster's biggest weakness is getting tripped.
And like he has, so like while trying to fight him, while Zoom has Linda in his arm basically, and he says to Wally, she's like a jewel to you. You left a rare diamond out on the open inside a vault. And Linda says, I'm not an object. I won't hide from anyone. And Zoom says, you're a target.
Yeah.
You need to go away. And he snaps a finger, creating another sonic boom, sending her flying.
Yep, and Wally's like, Linda! And then Zoom stops him before he can help her from, like, slamming against the ground.
Yeah.
And he's telling her, it's like, you have no secrets, you have no safe house, it's only a matter of time before she dies. Enjoy it while you can and learn from it. And then he disappears.
And the last panel that takes up like half the page is Wally just holding Linda in a silent, like, there's not even a background, it's just him on, like, a blue background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they take her to the hospital, and Bart's really sad about this too. And then this is my favorite thing. I really love villains that do this. They just do not stop, like, harassing people.
Just before he shows up, I just want to say another little, like, these little touches are why I really like the world that Johns builds here. Mm-hmm. Is you have, like, cops arguing, like, like outside the hospital, that they're like, well, Wally West shouldn't have been a glory hound. He used his public identity to get him a sweet apartment, and, like, we're risking our lives for that guy, and like the cops that we have been following the whole time are like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you know how many times he saves everybody? Fuck you. And, like, I like that there's, like, even when these cops can't affect the plot at all, it's way out of their realm, it's still showing they're, like, the blue collar people affected and emotionally invested in this arc as well.
Mm-hmm. And what I was saying before about, like, I like villains that keep harassing, because Wally is with Linda in the hospital, and they take her into the, like, no admittance emergency room, and this is where, like, Bart's really sad. He's like, I tried. He was just too fast. I couldn't stop him. And then Zoom just appears. It's painful when someone you love gets hurt. And he's constantly, like, a presence that's in this comic, not letting go. Rather than, like, when they show up at the Flash Museum or something, and then it's like, oh, hey, Professor Zoom here. It's like Zoom's just always going to be around them, like, taunting him. And so
this is where it gets the most, like, DBZ to me, where they're like,
yes,
take
truly.
my energy.
He's like Flashes of Earth, lend me your strength, as the other Flashes lend.
Jay and Impulse give him their kinetic energy.
Yeah. But they're
now
not
he's
moving.
super
Don't you
fast.
guys love this shit?
I
do.
love this part. I thought part.
I am like, it's just weird because they've never done this before, so it's like,
Well, but like I said, these are new powers that Wally has.
Yeah.
He's recently.
No, but
learned
you
how
say
to
just
steal
like
speed.
from a standpoint of, like, comics, like, taking from anime.
like, again, it's
I see
like,
what
I
you're
was
saying.
okay with it, like, with the last set where it's like, okay, the different speedsters kind of just have different varying strengths, whatever the plot needs. I can kind of buy that, but here it's like, the idea of like just giving him like powering
Their
him up to Super
speed force.
Saiyan, I'm like, oh, that's okay. I guess I didn't hate it. I was just like, it's weird, but.
I like that he had to take, because I like that it pre-established in the last issue where he takes kinetic energy from all the falling debris from the construction building. So I'm like, okay, that's an ability he has. And that's like, I guess it makes sense that you'd be able to take their kinetic energy as well.
But they're not moving.
Now they can't move, and
right?
now he's going to be super fast. And so Zoom punches him into pretty much like another climate.
Yeah, so it turns out even with Jay and Bart's power, he's still not fast enough to catch up with Zoom.
Yep, and he sees all the windows into time that Zoom tells, and then Zoom reveals that he's Hunter's
And
element.
Zoom isn't controlling those windows.
Yeah.
They just are popping up. So
Yeah.
one, it pops up, and it's Hunter exploding in the cosmic treadmill, and Wally's just like, what did you do to him? You know, what did you do to Hunter?
He's
and
like,
he's like,
me,
oh,
him.
he's fine.
Yeah.
And he thinks I was mad saying, I'm Hunter's
It me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and he says like, hey, Wally's like, we're friends. He's like, yeah, exactly, we're friends, but you wouldn't help me. You refuse to use the cosmic treadmill, so I'm going to teach you to take the risks. And he claps his hands together, creates an avalanche, and he's just yelling at Flash to look at him. And
This is where he says, like, it's not that he's trying to get, because he's like, to me, the way I read it, he's like, it's too late for me. But he says, like, I need to make you into a hero that will take any risk needed. You must learn, you must see what it's like to live with loss, so that you will do anything in your power to help people like me. I'm making you a better hero. Like, that's, to me, that's the parallel to his, I want to know why my dad did this so I could stop other people from going through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, like, that's to me why his motivation works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tells, as they're fighting, he's hitting Wally's ass.
I just went back to the hospital while we were fighting.
so fast.
Mid
Yeah,
punch.
listen, Wally, the doctor just told her, Linda's had a miscarriage. Your twins are dead. They are dead. And he says, let me tell you a secret. I found records. You're going to have a baby girl and a baby boy. And I'm teaching you how to be a better hero, Wally. Lesson 1 is over. Time for lesson 2. As he's choking Wally out, and Wally starts crying.
Yeah, I'm like, that is an asshole Zoom, if I've ever seen one.
Yeah.
And so we have the final issue, Blitz, the conclusion. It's the Flash running on the cover. And Zoom tells him, it's like, hey, guess what? Lesson 2, I'm going to cripple you. I'm going to cripple you like you crippled me. And get like two neat of like the lightning bolt and the reverse Zoom lightning bolt, where it tells both their origins in the little bubbles.
Oh yeah, like in the recap.
Also,
bubble
one of the
that's usually
other
at
things
top
I
of
wanted
the
to point
page.
out at the end of one of the last issues, like, what was it? It wasn't. I think it was 178. They're at like the Pied Piper's like room, and one of the books just says Zoom on the cover, which I enjoyed. Yeah.
Oh really?
And so Zoom, they're in the desert now, and he's just beating the shit out of him. He says like, "This is my class. It's my time. You will listen to me, and my name is not Hunter." And he sees like another tear in time, and it's Ashley. And all the tears in time look like kind of like the red lightning bolt that's on his chest too. Mm-hmm. And so he starts hearing things like the he won't have a gun. He won't have a gun. Heard what happened to your mother, and he starts yelling, "Go away!" And it like cracks the ground. And
Yeah,
he punches...
so when he told Wally to, like when we said that he has the control of the things, and how he told Wally to look at him, he basically just trying to ignore all the visions, because they're showing him stuff he doesn't want to see either.
Yep, and so he punches Wally, like, again, into another zone, and then Zoom leaves. And then who shows up to help? But it's Jessie Quick, who had ignored him. She's like, "I'm sorry, I should have been here."
So they go to hospital to check up on Linda, and they talk about how Zoom's power works. How
It's just the scene from Back to the Future. Jay brings out a chalkboard for some reason.
I was thinking this is like a callback to when they were talking about how Wally needs to be faster to beat.
Oh yeah. I guess you're right.
Yeah, where it's like, hey, we need to let's get all the Flashes together and talk about how do we go faster.
But I do like to explain that Zoom's power is based on time, not the Speed Force.
Yeah.
So his power works completely different than.
He can't go back in time, but he controls how fast or slow he's moving through time.
Yeah, so basically Zoom, after the cosmic treadmill exploded, he become unhinged in time. I was like, oh, I like this idea too, where it's like, it's not that he's going like necessarily faster. He's just like rapidly going through time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like that it's like you're not even fighting the same battle. Basically, like you're not actually trying to. He's not going faster than you. He's
You're fighting a time traveler.
But I'm like, how? I don't know how you ever beat that then, because no matter how fast you go, theoretically, it doesn't matter to him because he's wherever he wants to be in the future in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then, so when they confront him again, spoilers, the way you beat him is by having Jessie Quick also lend their strength to
So
Wally.
this is a reference to a Mark Waid story that I actually did consider putting in just because I think you guys would really like it. So right after the return of Barry Allen, the story we did last time, at one point, Wally tries out that speed formula because there's a helicopter about to crash and he doesn't know what to do. And he taps into the 3x2 9yz4a thing we talked about last week, and it basically freezes time for him. And he realizes that no matter how much time he has, he still is just a guy and he can't stop a helicopter from crashing. There's nothing he could do to save these people. And he ends up spending the whole issue with Max Mercury, who can also move that fast because he's, the mysterious Zen master. And he basically walks him through the whole city and shows him people that have already died that Wally wasn't there to save. It's like a car accident. And Wally's like, we got to save him. And he's like, look, this guy's already dead. And it's basically just like he's stuck frozen in time, and it's how Wally starts to accept you can't save everyone. You just do the best you can. And like, it's a great issue. And basically this is what he's referencing here, because Jessie's trying to help him fight Zoom. She gives him the speed and yells the thing, and it kicks him into that overdrive where he's basically unstuck in time as well. By like tapping into the Speed Force that hard.
I was going to say, I think one of my problems when I was reading this is because I just thought of Jesse Quick as another speedster. It was crazy to me that with Jay and Impulse's powers that Wally still couldn't match Zoom. But now
it's more that she's tapping into it in a different way. So like Jay and Barry are just giving him a stronger connection that he already taps into. This is tapping into like a different field.
Okay,
so
makes
it's like
sense.
Yeah, I didn't know that was like time stopping powers necessarily.
It's
So
not
why
even that
I
it's
was
necessarily
confused.
time stopping powers. It's just like the time that he's tried to use this thing in the past, it went so fast that he couldn't turn it off until it wore off, And he says, like, I suddenly realized what Jessie did. Her mantra had happened to me once before. Time nearly stops around me. All laws of physics are shattered. My eyes are starting to adjust to meeting the light instead of taking it in. And he sees Zoom is an out-of-focus blur, but then he can finally see him. The images begin to sharpen. Yeah. And he's like, the good thing is I'm as fast as Zoom. I'm standing still in time. The bad thing is I'm all alone. And he sees they're basically in this, like, very DBZ, like, they're in this, like, alternate dimension where they're fighting
Frozen
now.
time, yeah.
Yeah, so they start fighting, and Zoom's like, you're still pulling your punches. I didn't push hard enough, so you got to go to final exam. Then I got to go kill your wife.
He's like, I'm gonna do what all Zooms do.
Well, but that's the point. He's like, because he wants Wally to be willing to kill him.
Yeah, that's what he says to him. It's like, I want you to be able to kill me like Barry Allen killed Professor Zoom. I really hope the next, our final Flashuary thing is it ends with another Zoom coming back being like, I'm going to kill your wife.
I'm going to kill the wife of whoever the next Flash is.
And I thought this was, so he basically run around the world like Barry and Zalman did.
Yeah.
One thing I found cool is they're going so fast. Like they run all the way to Metropolis and run past Superman, and he's like, well, he says like, we ran back past so many superheroes, and I want to call out to my friends, but this is all happening for like a second to all of them. So like it shows like Superman's like one of the fastest superheroes. This is like happening for a second to Superman. Like Superman can't even comprehend what's happening.
1,000 miles with every punch thrown. I can't fight forever. I can already feel the speed I stole from Jesse being used up. I'm slowing down. And so they're getting closer and closer to they get back to Keystone City. It says, I push myself over the edge. I push myself over the edge to give me an edge. The world glows around me. The Speed Force calling to me. By concentrating on Linda, no one will ever take away from me. And as he's like got Zoom in a chokehold, he sees this like another tear in time of when Hunter Zolomon was asking, when Hunter Zolomon's the father figure is asking him, it's like, what do you think? Is this guy going to be armed? And this is when Wally says, I'm truly sorry, Hunter. I truly am. And then he sticks his head into the time window, and what it does is it fuses it freezes him in time in that image.
But he's like not in his important timeline.
Yeah, but he's stuck in the present, but like he's just there.
He's frozen in the present, but in his mind he's stuck in that moment where he was telling the dad that, oh, it's fine, he doesn't have a gun.
Yeah.
I can't believe you could argue that it's wrong to kill people, but it's okay to time hell them.
I'm not arguing that's right.
But wouldn't it be more right for him to just kill him there and not torture him for all eternity?
For me, this is because I see this And just real quick, that Wally sees like the little like another time tear of him.
He says, "I've won." And then he hears, "Go ahead, Wally. You've been dying to tell them. You could probably guess why we all called you here." And the last time window that opens is him and Linda saying, "We're going to be parents." And Wally reaches for it. He starts to cry and he says, "I've won." And the next panel is him on his knees in the same pose that Hunter is, and he says, "I've won nothing."
Yeah, and then this is where you get the. After that scene, they go back to the prison at Keystone City, and in a vault deep underground, the warden has Zoom locked in like a glass tube, and they're saying like, "What's he staring at?" And they're like, "Oh no!" And it's just you see the word bubble. He doesn't have a gun. Trust me, Ashley. He doesn't have a gun. Trust me, Ashley. And it just zooms in on his eye, and he's crying.
Zooms in on him,
and he's just crying, stuck in that moment.
And so this is where I was like,
horrible.
This is where I was like, Phil, where I was like. It reminds me, spoilers for Heroes Season 2, but there's this guy that they can't kill, so they're like, I'm going to teleport this guy into a coffin deep underground so he can never get out. And I was like, this is the worst. No one in the universe, no matter what bad you've done, deserves eternal punishment, period. Yeah. I'm like, that is too much. I'm like, it's like it's more merciful to kill Zoom than to lock him in time hell.
So I want to just, because we only have a couple pages left, I want to very quickly just talk about the epilogue, and then we'll talk about this thing.
Yeah.
So because the epilogue is mostly more set up for the next phase of Johns' run, what he goes to explore here.
Yeah.
But so this is really, to me, this is where like Blitz ends, and this is where Ignition begins, which is his next arc, which we're not going to cover. So it's Wally visiting Linda, and it's this very personal scene to me where she's like, "Did you stop him?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Is he?" And Wally's like, "Dead?" "No." And she's like, "But our babies." And then they're just holding each other, and Wally's like, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And then it just has a quick recap where like of what's happening, and Wally's like, "Bart's going off to join the Teen Titans, written by Geoff Johns, starting next month." And Jesse Quick is going to join the Justice Society, also written by Geoff Johns.
She gave up her powers, so she'll have different stuff.
Yeah, so it's like different status quo for her. And Iris is helping Linda, get through it, and shows them like in bed, and like they're, like she's like helping her. They're just like hanging out. And then Wally goes to the graveyard where he talks to Barry, and then fucking Barry shows up on the cosmic treadmill, and he's like, "Hey, I'm on my way to go die. Just want to tell you you're doing a good job."
I hated this so much. I could not believe they brought him back for this.
Very dumb. Very not good. And Barry's just like, just saying, like, shit sucks, but, you should be the Flash. Flash is pretty good. And then fucking the Spectre shows up.
Hell no. They go to the fucking house cemetery gravestone, and Hal shows up saying, "Hey, I'm gonna wipe away your fucking secret identity. I'm gonna bring back your secret identity, Flash." So and he's like, "Yes, it's cool. Get back what made me original, guys."
Okay, so that sucks. But what happens here, and I just like very quickly, so Hal wipes everybody's memory of who the Flash is, and like
he says, I can't change history, but I can from this point on make it that no one knows the Flash's identity.
Which I don't like. I don't like when they did this exact same fucking thing to Spider-Man a couple years later too. Like I don't like this. But the thing that is an interesting hook that this is not a justification of why it works here.
And it seems like we're rushing over the fact that Barry Allen and Hal Jordan show up out of nowhere. Yeah. The book does it too. Like we're not.
Yeah, it's very, very quick.
They just show up, but the thing is, they can both do that. I guess it's like it makes sense if Barry's like, "This is me before I died, coming to the future to just give you some like."
How does he use the cosmic treadmill? The cosmic treadmill blew up. Hunter's Island blew up the cosmic treadmill.
Not yet.
And also, but more importantly, like if you're a reader and you're getting invested in the stakes of the story, which is why I hate this ending, because I think Blitz is actually a good story, Blitz specifically. But you're getting invested in the stakes of the story, and then the story ends with saying the stakes are gone. Fuck you.
Okay, now the only reason why I want to push back on that a little, I agree that this is dumb and poorly handled. The only reason why I just want to push back on the stakes thing is because it's not just here's a new status quo, like, oh, nobody remembers him. Like that's the way it was done for Spider-Man, where Spider-Man just wakes up one day and like, because we covered Civil War way back when, where he told everyone he was. Spider-Man just wakes up and they're like, oh, your dead friends are back, and everybody remembers who you are, and you live with and nobody remembers who you are, and you live with Aunt May, and like all these things that like that's really, really shitty. But
You're
the way
Spider-Man
this is done
again.
Yeah, so Hal wipes everybody's memory, and the hook here is that he also wipes Wally and Linda's memory, so they don't know who the Flash is. And then we have a much quieter story called Ignition after this, where this is where I was saying that Wally and Captain Cold become like almost like acquaintance, friends with mutual respect to each other, because Wally doesn't know he's the Flash either. And you also have this thing where Wally hates the Flash because it's the Flash's fault that his unborn children were murdered. And he all of a sudden slowly realizes that he is the Flash for like a couple different reasons, and he has to come to terms with that. And when he finally tells Linda leaves him for a while because she's like, I know it is not your fault, but I have spent the last like 6 months, I don't remember what the time jump is. But she's like, I've spent the last months hating you, and I didn't know it was you, and now I know that you're part of why our babies are dead. I need some time apart. And it's not just here's this old status quo back. It becomes a very detailed and emotionally explored chapter in Wally and Linda's relationship, where they both have to come to terms with a past that they are just starting to remember. And it culminates around the same time that whole Barry Allen mind wipe thing happens that we were just talking about, that's used as part of it, of Wally like realizing that he shouldn't have done, like, it was unfair for him to put Linda through that. And there's a lot of character growth there. That is why here it sucks. But Johns does this dumb thing to set up a status quo that I think he explores really, really well. It just sucks that here it looks like
Space Magic does it.
It looks like Space Magic.
It is literally that.
It's worse because it was like a monkey's paw of Space Magic, where Hal didn't tell him, like, especially because Barry was like, "Hey, I want you to remember, you got to keep being the Flash," and then they trick him, and he's like, "I want to erase everyone's memory," and he's like, "Gotcha, you said everyone," and then he erases his memory. I'm like, it's just a dick move.
Hal Jordan's
Barry should not have
jerk.
been part of this decision at all. Like, what the fuck?
Keep being the Flash, but I'm going to knowingly participate in the erasure of your memory. Like,
yeah, it's dumb. It's dumb. But I just wanted to defend that it's one of those things that it's a dumb move, but like a lot of things we talk about, things might
You're
be
saying
set
a
up
good
really,
thing
really
came
dumb.
out of a dumb
good thing
move.
came out of it. And it's still, because it's the same writer, it's one of the reasons why, like, I forget how dumb this scene is handled, because I very rarely just read this scene without doing a reread of the whole run. So like, I just wanted to mention that, like, there's a lot of cool stuff after this, but I do agree that this is really stupid.
That is important because at least Geoff Johns had a plan. It's just that it felt like when he was writing, he had black blank hole in the space between.
Yeah, he's like, I want to get there, so what am I going to do?
I agree. I also think that, personally, I'm curious, because this was issue 200, which is this big anniversary issue, and usually for the 100 issues, they try to do these huge status quo shifts.
Yep.
I wonder if he ham-fisted this in order to make this issue the important one. And, like, the Blitz conclusion is, like, I think well-paced, and, like, all of the Zoom stuff, I think, is the way Johns wanted it to be. This feels like he was like, I want this issue to matter even more. Here's this and I only have 8 pages to do it.
The things
you
you guys used to argue about before, where you're like editorial decisions, where it's like they're like, we need Wally to not be the Flash. It feels like,
I don't know. I put this on Johns.
This is what I miss in the 80s and 70s. When X-Men reached issue 100, their momentous decision was them fighting robot versions of themselves. That was their momentous decision. Like,
and again, that's pure speculation. That's not based on anything other than just like my theory about it.
That's not commentary on this specific issue. In general, but that does happen where they make an issue.
That absolutely happens. Yeah, you want the big 100 issues because people are more likely to buy those, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I did not expect you guys to hate this so much.
I'm sorry. I felt bad actually, because when I made that comment in the chat before this, I'm like, this must be a bad one we were supposed to read. And when you didn't respond, I'm like, oh no.
No, Ryan had said, I think last week, you're like, this is like my favorite Geoff Johns story, right?
I really love this story.
I'm sorry. I feel bad because I do appreciate how much you love the Flash, and I will say I actually really like.
You guys don't have to like it. It's fine.
I liked the Flash a lot in the past 2 episodes we did, so I'm sorry.
You feel like it's balanced. You're like, I like plenty of the Flash.
Johns is a controversial figure for a lot of reasons. Like, I'm a big fan, but some people are super not. And, like, I think this story is a good example of why he is kind of controversial. Because, like, we did Shazam, which he also wrote, and you guys, like, seem to really, really like.
Yep,
we also did Flashpoint, which he wrote, which we all hated. You know,
Sucks.
and I think it's because Johns walks this line between modern edginess and Silver Age revisionism that is so arbitrary for me on where people fall on when it works and when it doesn't, that, like, for me, reinventing Grodd as this like animalistic primal villain instead of this more campy like I'm gonna take over the world type gorilla works for me because I find the animalistic like bloodlust to be more interesting in the franchise because it's something the Flash doesn't have. I understand why that super takes you guys out of it. You know what I mean? Like I find the balance between colorful costumes and like Zoom and how dark he gets to be really engaging. I get why people don't like it, you know, but it's one of those things I think that this is the kind of thing that it's why Flash fans love the Flash, but he's never going to hit the same level as Batman, Superman, Captain America, like these more iconic characters, because he has, just based on his power and his design, I think he has an inherent campiness built into him that if that kind of thing takes you out of it, I think that's where it's gonna fall. You know, even like you guys seem to really enjoy it last week and the week before, but there was still a lot of I don't know about this part. See, you know,
I feel like I'm sorry. It's every time you say it, it's like, oh man, you guys really enjoyed last week, and you guys really didn't enjoy this week. For me, both these stories were about the like this week and last week were about the same level of enjoyment for me. Where I'm like, they're all right. Like I like this one more, but I had more gripes with it at moments.
That's interesting.
Whereas for me, the last story was like, it was good. It like I can see what Sly's saying, where there's a lot of like really good moments in it, other than like Professor Zoom's motivation. But like I cared more about what was happening here than the last one, where it's just like, hey, I'm back. Instead, here it's like this is a really interesting, and I was interested in seeing how he would solve it. And it's like at the end of it, I did feel like punch in the gut, where because I thought he had twins, but I guess Flashpoint redoes that.
Well, no, by the end of Johns' run ends with them having the twins.
Okay.
Through shenanigans. But
of course.
The thing is, it's the kind of thing that I think it is handled very, very well, but there is no possible way for me to explain it that doesn't make you guys despise it, so I'm just not going to.
I mean, you already had time-traveling Iris in Fat Man's body, so I don't care anymore.
And raining paratrooper gorilla is on.
Yeah, it's just, but like, it's complicated because Johns writes long-form comics, so it's very hard for me to be like, well, this one arc, you would have to know a bunch of new concepts and characters, and like there's a million things.
Which I feel like you've been doing throughout this entire thing is like, actually, this is related to this, and this is related to that.
Yeah, which is why like I'm not as good at planning out these mega things as Sly is, and part of it is because I don't want to edit pieces of PDFs from different issues. Yeah. But like to me, that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, is to see what works in context and what doesn't, because like a lot of times if somebody's like, I want to read The Flash, I can't give them 60 issues of Geoff Johns' run to read. You have to pick a place. And I would always start with Blitz, but like no one's ever asked me this, so I've never done it. But
I guess no one's wanted to start with
that. But like, you know, it's one of those things that like this story means a lot to me, but I've only ever read it when I read the whole run. So like I'm also thinking like you guys talk about how dark and gritty and like depressing like the babies and stuff are in it, but I've always viewed them as part of a narrative that ends with them becoming parents, not this is the story of how Wally's unborn kids are killed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like is, in isolation, it's seen as that.
Yeah.
But Hunter Zolman is just pure dark.
Serial
killer dad fucking because his back
I'm not saying it's not dark.
And then his ultimate, his resolution is being put in time hell, watching the worst part of his life repeated forever.
Yeah.
Like he is just like the most screwed over character I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Spoilers for next week. It's not for eternity.
Oh my god! I'm so excited.
Okay, this is
I never thought. I feel like I'm now in like Bleach Hell, where I've been tortured so much, where I'm like zoom.
I'm glad. I am glad, even though you guys were super into it. I am glad that you appreciated Hunter, because I think Hunter's a really cool character, and like I feel for him a lot, and like I'm glad that shone through a little bit.
I will say, you talking about Ignition made me back to like a 7 out of 10 for this.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty good. That's better than most things.
Solomon, I'm more in the Mark Waid camp of superheroes, I feel, which is why I've never latched out to Geoff Johns. I think Mark Waid in general, if you want to know how I wish comic books would be like, just look at Kurt Busiek or Mark Waid in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I wish comics were more like. And that's kind of why I like Hunter Zolman. Like, if you cut it, especially when you mentioned that he does get the kids later on eventually, because it is dark. He's trying to kill people, and but it's still still the more question of whether Wally should do the dark thing or not. It's a very old, it's a very comic booky old age superior question of whether he should do it. And Hunter Zolomon is a compelling character. I still would cut if Grodd wasn't a part of this. I would like this a lot more, but I think overall
he's technically not a part of the Blitz experience. I like that Ryan was showing us more of the rogues and he was showing us Grodd.
He's part of Hunter Zolomon.
Oh yeah, he did. He paralyzed him.
Like Hunter Zolomon, as he's going to the cosmic treadmill, he sees Grodd, he shakes in fear. But I will say, so Geoff Johns will never be one of his image of comics is never going to be my image of comics, but he's written many stories that I really enjoy.
Like Flashpoint.
Exactly. I would knowing that the ramifications a bit more, I would say this is teeters more towards the story I enjoy.
It's also, to me, Johns, a lot of people like really harp on him being like super Silver Age revisionist and he brings back all these characters and stuff, which he does do. But at the same time, like, he's the character, he is the writer that like he brought like Hunter. He didn't bring back Eobard Thawne. He creates Hunter Zolomon, which is, and
he homages Eobard Thawne, which I thought was interesting. Because
and also, like, he ends his run with Wally. Him and Linda didn't get divorced, and, like, he does undo his secret identity, but he also does give him 2 children, which is, like, how... there is, like, a lot of people point to Dick Grayson as the character that was allowed to grow up, but, like, Wally West is the only character that we meet as a child, and he grows up and has children. Like, that's not in comic books. That's just not a thing. And like Johns, he likes to bring back, he brought back Hal Jordan and like did all these like things, but he also is always pushing the universe forward in a way that like his Justice Society run has a lot of legacy characters. We see Jessie join the team. Jessie is not a Justice Society team. Incorporating her into that is pushing that franchise forward in a new way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I don't think he strictly just retcons everything like a lot of people accuse him of.
When you brought up Grant Morrison, brought back Barry, I think Grant Morrison's more guilty of that. Going purely Silver Age.
It's funny because I think he is more guilty of that, but I also think that he makes more risky changes than Geoff Johns.
He does, but he's trying. I'm assuming what he's trying to do. He's trying to bring it back, but he's trying to justify its existence in the modern era. So he raises all these questions about the concepts he's bringing back.
Yeah.
Because it'll be very, very boring if it was just the original 70s stuff exactly.
Yes.
So he's trying to bring it back and justify its presence.
For sure.
But Wally feels more like, Geoff Johns feels like he's trying to keep the continuous timeline and the changes that exist already more often.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Cool. So we are 75% of the way through our Flash saga. Thank you guys for going on this journey with me, you 3. I know that it's had its ups and downs.
We did Bleach, so it's like, what could
what could be
worse than doing that?
Truly.
I'm glad that my favorite thing is almost as bad as Bleach.
We didn't say almost as bad.
I know, I'm just kidding. I don't take it personally.
Yeah,
I still have. This is why I sit alone and read comic books all day. So do you guys have anything to plug or anything? Does DM at all have some new stuff out?
We just recently released our episode on Ravenloft. If any of you played 5th edition's Curse of Strahd, it was based originally off the Ravenloft module, so we talked about the original version of that basically. And next, in a week or so, we're going to release the sequel, Ravenloft 2, which was a weird, forgotten sequel that everyone tries to pretend didn't happen.
That sounds awesome. And I know if you guys back your Patreon, you get things early, right?
Yes, do that. Then.
Yeah. So that's patreon.com/DM at all. I'll do the heavy lifting on that.
Thanks.
Yes, do that.
You're our lightning rod.
Well, I have had some listeners, reach out to me about the Patreon and stuff, and like my suggestion is if you want to keep supporting us, support Phil and support Daryl and Sly at DM it all. It's their Patreon is less expensive than ours for content that is probably better. Mm-hmm. So pass the savings on to them. And if you want to follow, I just launched all of my new band's social media accounts. We put up a bunch of cool pictures. We're going to be releasing some songs as we finish our first album, but you should follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll have an Instagram soon, but it's Premium Heart, and all the tags are like Premium Heart NY. So yeah, and I run the Twitter, so you can talk to me there. Or, don't, whatever.
You can't
but
have to.
Yeah, so cool. So thank you all for listening to Divisive Issues. I've been showing up just to mind wipe all of my co-hosts.
I've been Prism.
I've been putting Ryan in time hell as a mercy.
And I've been controlling an army of gorillas to get me out of prison.
Stay in continuity.